across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is
You have a little look and you just think, I've got nowhere to go. The venue itself, this was the Winter Gardens in Margate. Yeah. All there is a vending machine that sells rubbish coffee.
Dreadful job.
It was horrific. It's a whole night I'll never get back. Nigel Farage is not at this count, though, Dave.
No, it's not clear what it is. He's
in fact,
saying
can I just interrupt you there, because we are going to cross now, because the returning officer is in situ. Let's have a listen.
I give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Darwood Thomas Faithful, commonly known as Joseph 77, Independent 42. Al-Khatib Adam, the Forward Party 49. Harvey Jonathan David, commonly known as Count Binface, the Count Binface Party 9,455. Delves Nicholas Charles Ellsworth, commonly known as Nick the Incredible Nick the Incredible Flying Brick, the official Monster Raving Loony Party 28. Kane Tony, Independent 17. Carr Matthew Nigel, commonly known as Woke Trump Kazi, Independent 8. Clouston William Stewart James, Social Democrat Party 256. Cowan Rees, Independent 50. Cowan Rees, Independent 50. Cummings Glenn Charles, Independent 7. Davies Martin, Freedom Alliance, Real People, Real Alternative 60. Earlham Andy, Independent 44. Farage Nigel, Reform UK 22,239. Fard Atia, Independent 126. Fox Lawrence, the Reclaim Party 347. Francis Tony, Independent 432. Green Robin, Independent 59. Hookway Abbey, Independent 14. Hope Allen, commonly known as Howling Lord Hope, the official Monster Raving Loony Party 18. Ingram Stephen Richard, Independent 159. Morris Amy, Independent 46. Morris Derek Norbert, Independent 100. O'Brien Martin, Independent 65. O'Keefe Michael Noel, Independent 19. Pellis Nick, Independent 202. Pipalaya Ketankuma, UK Voice Safer and Stronger UK 21. Pocock Daniel 16. Ransley James, Consensus Party candidate 192. Smith Jerry, Independent 9. Stevens Kai, British Democrats, 132. Stevens John, Rejoin EU, 492. Berry Peter Bryan, commonly known as Baron von Thunderclap, the official Monster Raving Loony Party, 15. Walford Pamela, Independent, 371. White Marcus, Everyone is God, Party, 10. Wilkinson Mark, Independent, 11. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows: for want of official mark 0, voting for more candidates than voter was entitled 40, writing or mark by which voter could be identified 1, being unmarked or wholly void for uncertainty 239, the total is 280. The electorate is 79,785 and the ballot papers issued as referred to above is 35,401, meaning that the turnout was 44.37%. And I therefore do hereby declare that Nigel Farage is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Clapton constituency at this election. Thank you all very much indeed.
So there it is. Nigel Farage, no big surprise there. Back in situ. He's increased by around about 1,000 votes on what he got in 2024, from 21,225 to 22,000. I think it was 229. So he's up. Quite a lot of people. A lot of people lost 500 quid last night in Clacton, because you've got to, of course, hit your, was it 5% to retain your 500 quid or something of that nature. There were so many that got double digits that I lost count, frankly.
Well, I noticed the lowest lowest number of votes given was 7 to 1 candidate,
yeah.
And that nobody got over 500 apart from Count Binface and Nigel Farage.
Well, Binface got 9,455.
Yeah.
I don't want in any way to reduce the political credentials of Count Binface, but I think it's reasonable to say there was somewhat of a protest vote, and he was the chief recipient of that.
Yeah. Anybody who was possibly a Labour voter or didn't want to see Nigel Farage do well would have voted behind Binface. I mean, some of the left-leaning papers were promoting him as a candidate, a protest candidate. So, yeah, so he'll be happy with that. He'll also be relieved he hasn't won, because I suspect deep down a comedian thought, oh, my goodness, if I become an MP and have to go into Parliament and be serious for... and do a job. I mean, goodness gracious me.
Would the Speaker have allowed the bin?
Well, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't have allowed the bin. He'd have to go in as.
But if it's part of his identity these days, you know, I mean,
that would have been fascinating.
It's not an immutable characteristic, perhaps, but it could be argued that, you know, in the world of identity politics, you know, the bin comes where he goes, the bin goes. He should go in it, frankly.
Thank goodness. I bet Lindsay Hoyle is relieved that he doesn't have to work on through that one this morning.
Yeah, he'd probably been having bad dreams about selecting the bin for a question. Lawrence Fox, who was, I suppose you could tacitly say, was the nearest thing to a sort of Ristori-type character.
Yep.
He stood under the Reclaim Party, which is his own party. But I think I'm right in saying he has sort of certain, at least, sympathies, understandings with Restore. But he got 347, so his deposit has gone into the bin as well.
Yeah, so. But he was among the higher recipients of votes, but
the higher of the lower
of the lower ones,
yes.
You know. But he wasn't at the races really.
No, he wasn't.
It's like the Grand National. He was one of the stragglers who came in at the end. Yeah.
So it's congratulations to Nigel. He's back as the MP. There was no big surprise there, of course. Now, this happened because he resigned in order, I suppose, to re-establish his credentials as the people's favourite. Amidst what he said was an establishment stitch-up, the investigation into donations. That's now re-triggered, so that opens, as I understand it, immediately. They go back to tucking into the details of the donation question. Does he achieve this? Many, you know, even supporters of Nigel Farage said it was a bit of an odd thing to do. It was a bit of a strange way. It doesn't sufficiently or authentically clarify your credentials of the people versus the establishment. No. It merely means you're re-elected in an already safe Reform seat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what it has shown, with a, 45% turnout, and he wins overwhelmingly with an increased share of the vote, that he is popular in that area and would, in fact, win an election, even if the Conservatives and the Labour Party and the Lib Dems were fielding candidates. So I think even if he is found to have broken the rules by the Sleaze inquiry, MPs may shy away from having another by-election. They may suspend him from the House for fewer than the, is it 10 days, where you can have a recall petition.
That would trigger a by-election.
So I think they'll shy away from having another vote. I mean, they could do it, but I mean, the cost of it, and then for them to be defeated, they'd have to field candidates in another by-election.
Indeed. So Nigel Farage was not at the count. Reform said they were advised not to attend by Essex Police. Essex Police said they had not advised any candidate to stay away from the count, so we'll make of that whatever you wish. Reform UK has also cancelled a planned speech from Nigel in Clacton this morning. But he did speak overnight. We're going to cross to Clacton in just a second. Let's just have a listen to Nigel Farage speaking overnight.
I called this by-election because I wanted the people of Clacton, the voters of this constituency, to be my judge, not the mainstream media in Britain and the political establishment who paint us out to be criminals and bad people every day. So I asked the voters of Clacton to be my jury. And the verdict has now come in. You haven't heard it yet. And the verdict is in, and it is a convincing, overwhelming win with more votes.
So that was Nigel Farage speaking overnight. So even early doors, you know, we were aware Mr Farage was going to win this, Dave. But he even knew that there were more votes there at that time, which is really just a case of the visuals, of looking at the stacks on a desk.
Yeah, I mean, it was clear that he was going to win this. And those who were thinking otherwise were just living in a dream world, really, because he is extremely popular there. And he's extremely popular around the country, although some believe he's been tainted a little bit by this scandal. But
well, we'll find out on that, won't we, when Parliament do their investigation.
Yeah.
Let's cross then to Clacton. Samara Gill, talk reporter, of course, live there, looking even at this unearthly hour, Samara. It's looking summery there right now, and obviously jubilation for Reform, and a couple of dozen people losing 500 quid for daring to stand against him. Morning.
Morning, Ian. Yes, it seemed like there was tactical voting in Count Binface's favour in some sort of way. The sort of oppositional vote gathered together in order to get those 9,000 votes for him. But yes, Nigel Farage triumphed, as we all predicted. There was a Farage Fest last night, which happened about 12 kilometres or 12 miles from here, in a paddock, and it was a very, very sort of flamboyant affair, you know, live music, all the different Reform MPs, and a bunch of Clacton residents were there as well. He claimed that that was paid for by the people of Clacton, but he also said that the ticket cost didn't cover everything. So obviously there was donors' money thrown in there as well. So it was a very, very interesting sort of thing. I mean, we haven't seen this level of political theatre in the United Kingdom, I feel like, ever. You know, these massive sort of paddocks filled with, there was a Ferris wheel there, there were game shows, there were all sorts of things. And of course, he did his victory speech even before hearing the count. And as you just played, said that it was a resounding win. But 775 new votes, I'm not so sure. We are starting to scratch our heads a little bit here as journalists, wondering what the point was of this whole thing. A lot of people I've spoken to, cab drivers, etc., do believe that it's an establishment stitch-up that is happening to Farage, and that this is the two fingers up to the establishment that they want and that they want to take part in. But there are others that are completely disenfranchised by the whole fior and don't want anything to do with what media hell this has brought upon Clacton, and also how they feel slightly used by Farage and how he didn't even show up to the count where they did put their good vote in.
And this would, I mean, this is expensive to run a by-election. None of these things come cheap. I've never been able to quite work out why it's so expensive to, you know, get a load of people to tick a piece of paper and then count them. But nonetheless, the whole infrastructure of setting up a by-election is expensive. It would have eaten as well into Reform's coffers, one would assume.
Massively, and I think they saw a bit of, I mean, we know that there were internal text messages going around where they redirected everyone from the Manchester mayoral by-election to Clacton once Nigel had announced things. This has obviously cost the taxpayer around here £250,000. Now, Reform said that they would actually pay that back to the council, but unfortunately, because of just rules, they couldn't do that because it would look like the winning party was paying off a council for a by-election that they won. So it would just not bode well, and would, I think, be illegal when you look at the actual rule book there. So I think it's cost Reform a lot of money to put on. I totally agree. There were so many canvassers out here. Farage was claiming that he was doing 32,000 steps a day, door knocking everyone around Clacton. But I guess this has sort of rehabilitated his image somewhat. The atmosphere around here, especially with the good weather and a nice sort of summer vibe, has contributed to making sure that Farage is still popular in Clacton and remains so. But, you know, as David said, there's still that Parliamentary Standards Committee that he will have to front up to now that he is once again an MP. And we might be back here for another by-election in a couple months' time.
That would be extraordinary. And, of course, Mr Farage did not attend the count. A planned speech for this morning has also been cancelled.
Yeah, it has, which I find somewhat disappointing because I think that he should stand up to the media and face a little bit of scrutiny over this. I mean, I think that he ran a great campaign, but of course, you know, did they wargame this from even happening? You know, him not standing against any of the other party leaders. They have been able to spin it very well in their favour, but I think that he's probably just getting, you know, some sleep at the moment, and he probably had a bit too much fun at Farage Fest, if I'm thinking about it. So, yeah, I think he claimed that he delivered his concession speech last night, and that's kind of the last we'll see of him. But if he is around the town, I'll be sure to bring it to talk.
Indeed. Mr Farage was told, for security reasons, he says, or Reform say, not to attend by Essex Police.
Yes, so Jamie McIver said to the BBC that there was a credible threat against Farage at the count. Now, as you said, Essex Police have totally refuted that statement and said that there was no credible threat in their view. Of course, security and policing have been a big narrative of this entire by-election. I mean, the death of Anne Widdecombe happened pretty much in the middle of the campaign. Just a couple of days ago, Nigel attended her funeral along with other Reform members, and they are stressing the need for proper security for all their MPs and saying that they are under threat. The question will be, though, I mean, from cynics, is he using sort of the threats that have happened in order to, I don't know, avoid certain things like standing next to Count Binface, because, of course, the police have said that there was no threat. So So it's just an interesting one, isn't it? But it has absolutely brought up the big question about security around our members of parliament, and especially the reform ones who do face a lot of abuse and vitriol from all sides.
Samara, we're going to be back with you throughout the course of this morning. Thank you. Enjoy the early morning of Clacton. It's a great place to be. Samara Gill, talk reporter, live just by the pier over there in Clacton. I mean, quite extraordinary. We did hear, you know, sort of off the record from one insider that when it came to this parliamentary investigation, that some in Reform thought it would go away as a result, but nobody actually checked to see whether that was going to be the case. And of course it doesn't go away, it just simply resurfaces now that he's won the by-election.
Yeah, nobody factored in, of course, what the main parties would do, and they seem to have colluded to have boycotted this by-election, which gave Keir Starmer the great line of Nigel Farage is going to spend all summer arguing with a bin. And I think that may have something to do with the fact that he's not gone to the count today.
I mean, he's done well to avoid... I can't even think of a single moment when the two were caught together, were they, in any form
no,
of
I don't
this? So,
think they
you know,
were.
they sort of pass... Often, you know, candidates might pass each other in the high street as they're giving out leaflets and pressing the flesh and whatever. I wonder what it would have looked like had the other parties, had the Tories and Labour and the Lib Dems turned up. Would it have changed the amount of people that voted for Nigel Farage?
I don't think it would have done. I think what would have happened is the vote would have been split a little bit more. The people who perhaps were Labour voters and didn't come out today, what was it, 44% turnout?
44.3%, I think.
Yeah, you would have, you would have had...
It was 58.4 in 2012.
Probably had a slightly bigger turnout, but...
so it's a smaller turnout, but he's got an increased vote share. So he's in that respect, he's done better than he did in 2024, quite clearly.
So you may have had a few thousand more turning out to voting for the likes of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, but clearly they thought that he was going to win it anyway, which is why they boycotted it.
Yeah.
If they thought there was an inkling of a chance of taking the seat off him, they'd have fielded candidates.
It's interesting that he didn't attend. I mean, this comes in from Richie in mid-Sussex, and this really kind of highlights the level of distrust, I think, lots of people have in this thing that is now being referred to as the establishment. Referring to authority, the government, political system and structures, and the media in particular. Richie says, Nigel Farage, firstly, well done for increasing the vote. Nigel Farage being advised by Essex Police not to attend the count, and then Essex Police saying they didn't give any advice for him not to attend the count. Like I and thousands of other people would believe anything Essex Police have to say. And I'm not particularly a fan of Nigel Farage, says Richie. Well, I mean, I get this. I understand why people have that sense. I don't know whether Essex Police would literally lie and say, oh no, we sneakily told him not to go, and then we're going to say no, we never told him that. I mean, that would be quite an overt. That's quite a big lie for the old Bill, isn't it?
And security is usually quite tight around these because it's defending our democracy, and on the counts there is always, even on the general election, there's the police presence at all the counts, and so there would have been an increased presence there.
I would have thought there was a genuine potential for it to be sort of carnage-like in the sense of chaotic, that you might have got this sort of collective crowd that wouldn't let Nigel Farage get a word in edgeways. It might have been a fairly undignified affair.
I think that's...
And I can understand why he didn't want to be part of that.
It would have been not humiliating, but embarrassing.
Yes, because he still won convincingly.
And he'd be still that picture of him with a bin, standing next to bin face, and all these lunatic fringe candidates, all who were making a noise there during the count.
All crowded round him.
Somebody who got 7 or 8 votes, and there were more than 7 or 8 people were cheering. So all the supporters who'd come in there.
It's a lot of supporters for people who got like 20 votes.
Yes, I know, it was quite a lot of
Who stayed up all night for that? I mean, even if my best mate did it, I'm not sure I'd go. We're going to take a brief pause, Dave. Calls and comments from you, please. 0344 499 1000. It's the big dominating story. No surprise, Nigel Farage has won the Clacton by-election with an increased, smaller turnout, but an increase in his vote by about 1,000. So it's gone up in that respect. His nearest rival was Count Binface. This, of course, was tactical from many angles. He got 9,455 votes, so he doesn't lose his deposit. There is that. 6:25. Lines are open. This is Talk.
Demonstrate to the public that you are doing everything.
But the key thing here, as you say, he's the Prime Minister. He has the power, as did previous Prime Ministers, to do things like build more prisons and failed to do so. This has been the first real test of Andy Burnham, where I'm going to please everybody. I'm Mr. Nice Guy. Dan Hodges thinks I'm great. And then he's failed it at the first attempt.
I don't think he's... I don't think
I
he's
mean, I've been reading your columns, Dan. I mean, come on. You think the sun shines out of his backside.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Yeah, 28 minutes after 6 o'clock. Bill in Cheshire says the Clacton by-election, given the motley crew of joke candidates on display, how does that look to a worldwide audience? The UK, a cradle of democracy. It may be democratic, but blimey, says Bill. Fair point. Peter Day... Pete in Southend. The only other serious candidate was William Clouston, Social Democrat, only got 250. He does seem to appear in quite a lot of by-elections, and he's a fairly diligent character. Whether people like the... I couldn't, if I'm brutally honest, give you the sort of centre point of his politics, but I'm roughly aware of where he comes from. He only got 250, which would always beg... You'd have to go deep. You need a student of politics doing a dissertation to somehow be able to kind of rip this one apart. But it's interesting. How many people in Clacton would have looked at somebody like William Clouston, the Social Democrat candidate, if they'd looked at him and probably gone, actually, this guy is, like, really what I stand for? But I don't think there's a lot of people that don't look that deeply.
No. Most people just look at the Labour Conservative reform and vote for what they want in that sense. But there are, you know, occasionally in politics, somebody is thrown up there who's got a unique and completely different way of looking at politics, and they seem to not seem to get anywhere because they're not affiliated to a main party.
This one from Deborah says, I was always under the impression that elections and by-election candidates stood to represent their constituencies. Having people turn up in fancy dress makes a mockery of politics and the voters in those constituencies. I believe people should only stand if they genuinely want to improve people's lives. Those who dress up, have no intention of winning, and openly admit they're only there for a bit of fun shouldn't be on the ballot. Even the Looney Party said it's just entertainment. All it does is siphon votes away from serious political parties and make the UK look like a laughingstock internationally. It's time for change. Stop the fancy dress theatrics and raise the fee to £5,000 to stand. I kind of get that point. The raising the fee thing is perhaps something I think we could look at. Simultaneously, you have to go, well, it's a democracy. You've got to take the weird with the authentic and the genuine.
There's some credit in that comment, but I'm not going to die in a ditch over it and arguing over this. I think there's some valuable points being made there, but it's part of being British, isn't it? It's the British humour, the British way of life, and as you rightly say, Ian, if it's a democracy, however crazy your viewpoints are, you should be allowed to stand and let the people decide.
You've always got that life story, haven't you? Yeah. I once stood in a by-election, and I'm sure most of these people, their mates in the pub said, we'll put the 500 quid together, don't worry, you won't lose anything. They had a bit of a whip round, and you do a bit of electioneering, you turn up on the night, you hope that the person that wins... I mean, in some of those constituencies, you've got the Prime Minister standing. You know, when Makerfield comes up next time around, the Prime Minister of the day will be standing there next to a man with a bin on his head.
He will, yeah.
And that's... And you certainly wouldn't get that in North Korea.
If things carry on as they are, Andy Burnham might...
In fact, if you tried it, you would get a bin on your head. for a whole different reason. Yes, full of dynamite. That's how that would work. Chris is in Oxford. Chris, morning.
Good morning, Ian. How are you?
Good as gold at this end. What are you thinking?
Well, I find it incredible that people who hate Nigel Farage vote for a bin. Instead of, and this happens all over the country, people are so stupid sometimes because they don't look at the policies.
Yeah.
What Nigel's offered, stop the votes within 2 weeks. Basically what they're saying, because they don't like the man himself, they don't look at the policies, is, yeah, they'll have the votes in. They don't mind if Labour truck a load of migrants into Clacton. They don't mind higher taxes. This is a result of using the most valuable thing we've got for changing governments, which is our vote. And yet they waste it. And the country does it as well, all over the country, because they don't like somebody. They don't look at the policy. As for the parliamentary investigation, well, that's just, you know, that's just a joke. Yeah. Because you've got Labour, Conservative, Liberal. Of course they're going to find him guilty some way or the other, because they want to get rid of reform. I find it incredible. And as for Essex Police, I would not believe them. Look at what's happening in policing with Anne Widdecombe. The only people I would believe is the terrorist squad that actually linked a murderer to that political side, whereas the police were absolutely wrong.
Do you think... Do you genuinely believe that Essex Police would have told Nigel Farage, look, there's been a threat, don't turn up to the count, and then 10 minutes later deny they ever gave that advice?
The way things happened with the other police, with Anne Widdecombe, yes. The only people I would believe in terms of a genuine threat would be the anti-terrorist squad that said to the police in that, you're wrong. This is
I mean, do you think... I mean, many people are arguing that the police got an unfair kind of hearing on the Anne Widdecombe story. They gave a press conference saying, at this moment in time, there's nothing to link this to politics, and obviously we have to be careful. There's a court case about to happen, so we can't get into too much detail. Was that not reasonable that the police at that point gave that information?
I don't think they should have given any information at all. You know, they made a big boo-boo by saying nothing to see here, you know, it was just a burglary, and they were totally and utterly wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure they quite said that, but you're right. I mean, they did allude very obviously that there was no... Well, they said at this point there's no political motive that we can find, but then, of course, 5 minutes later, the counter-terror police were involved.
Well, that's right. And now we've got a person with political links that's now up in court to be tried. So the ground force police, when they've got supposed to, or reform said, they've got credible threats, let the counter-terrorist police look at it, because ordinary police just aren't equipped with today's police in the way that Labour's turned it.
Okay.
A force that can be trusted.
Well, Chris, thank you very much for that. It's interesting, David. It comes back really to this sort of establishment thing, and there are people, I think, perhaps Chris is one of them, that sense, rightly or wrongly, that if something happens to a reform-linked person, it is treated differently to if it was somebody of another party.
Yes.
That's sort of the upshot of all of this.
And Chris makes a very good point there about the policing. Whether or not our view seems to be that the police wouldn't lie on this case about there being a threat to Nigel Farage at the count.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with that. Nevertheless, it's not surprising that people like Chris don't believe it, because they've either lied to us or have been
got it horribly wrong. Yes.
Horribly wrong in the past with Southport,
Yeah.
with Anne Widdecombe, with so many of these cases. That the credibility of what the police tell us has taken a knock.
Do you think the police, I mean, in terms, this is a largely separate point away from the Clacton by-election, but we're sort of living in a world now where there's very vocal demands of how much information we want from police. You know this from being a journalist for decades, Dave, that, you know, when something happens, you sort of await a police conference. You might get one, you might not get one at all. You could wait for days, it could be weeks before, because they're investigating. And it was never a line that you could have very successfully cross. You might get a tip-off, you might have a contact in a local police station, or somebody that you know that can give you a little bit of off-the-record information. But broadly speaking, we certainly didn't need to know or didn't ask to know the ethnicity or the nationality of a person that's been arrested. And now that is demanded. I was seeing people on social media saying, even after somebody had been arrested with the Anne Widdecombe, so why are the press not talking to the friends and colleagues of this person? It's a stitch-up. Well, of course, the reason you're doing that is because somebody's been charged with a murder, and that would completely, and very potentially, in certain cases, put a stop to a court case, which is the curious thing, that people who are looking for truth and transparency often run the very risk of achieving the opposite to what they claim they're looking for.
Well, this is the big problem now. It is social media. In the days before social media, you get experienced journalists who would speak to people behind the scenes, get the details, and use their experience to, if there's any speculation, to speculate along the lines, something that is believable and that they know from experience is probably what's happening.
Yes, yeah.
What you're getting now is people with no knowledge, no background information, who are just speculating wildly on social media, and the most outrageous observations usually get the most pickup.
Absolutely.
That is a problem the police have now, which is why they have to be more open than they were before.
Yeah. And I spoke to one defence barrister who said to me it's pretty standard now for defence barristers to throw in, my client can't possibly get a fair trial here because the speculation on social media has been so rife, and it will, if nothing else, it will dilute, at the very least, the chances of real balance being shown, because people have already speculated. So it's being used by... It doesn't matter how many times you tell people, if you work in our industry, what they sort of laughingly call the mainstream media, if you work in broadcast, print journalism, whatever, there's a rule book. You don't even need to... after you've done it, you don't even need to write it down or refer to it. You just know what you can and cannot say. You know how you've got to source a story. You know how far you can take a quote, whether you could trust it. All of that is out the window. And social media, legally, is meant to adhere by exactly the same rules as you, Dave, when you write a column for The Sun.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Bob in Arbroath, when he posts on Twitter, he is subject to the same rules as you. But Bob doesn't know that.
No, and something's got to give sooner or later, Ian. Either the police or the authorities are going to have to crack down on people who break these rules and do them in the courts.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. If you say Bob from Arbroath tweets something and it's watched by 100 people, does he get any more punishment than somebody who does it and it's watched by 5 people?
Yeah.
I mean, where do you draw the line? That's point one. But the other issue is they're going to have to look at this business of prejudicing a trial. I think judges are going to have to say to people, you ignore anything you've read on social media, and trust the jury to be clear on that.
Yes.
Because we can't go on like this anymore.
See, I'm slightly old-fashioned in this, and whilst I know that there can be all manner of... and I don't even know whether it's establishment stitch-up or whether sometimes it's just cock-up, where somebody has missed something out, and often, you accuse different elements, police, media, whatever, of of omission rather than what they've said, not often what they haven't said. And there's a thirst on social media. Why are the police not telling us this, etc.? I don't want to know any of that. And I speak as a journalist. I don't want to know any of that. There's a court case to establish all of that. Yeah. That's exactly why there's a court case. There's a jury going to hear all of this stuff. If there are friends that are going to come out either against or in favour and say, oh, yeah, I went to school with him, he's a right old weirdo, even back then bring it up in a court case. I don't want to see that played out on social media. And the very same people who correctly, absolutely correctly attacked David Lammy over the let's get rid of juries in certain cases and were very animated. No, you can't do that. It's the authenticity of our legal system. Our justice system are doing all the things that actually go against this, the justice system we have.
It's a great point, that, Ian. It's a great point. I mean, the jury system is there so that we can hear all the evidence and we can see it. And you know, some of these courts make cracking stories when the trial comes out, things we didn't know.
Yes.
And then suddenly you go into court and day one, out comes this bombshell of an allegation, and it makes the front pages of papers.
Absolutely,
and none
right.
of us knew anything about it until the trial started.
Completely. Don't go away, Mike in Durham with you in a few moments. 0344 499 1000. Drop us a voice note on any of this. We've moved into other territory as well, but the central story this morning, Nigel Farage has convincingly won the by-election in Clacton. It was already his seat. He resigned that. You know the story. Stood again to make a point about the support he has against what he and Reform call the establishment stitch-up. He's won. Count Binface came second with I think we can reasonably say, some protest voters chipping in to prop up his 9,455 result. But nothing compared to Nigel Farage, who came back with over 22,000. So he is firmly, convincingly, unequivocally, again, the MP for Clacton. There's still the parliamentary stuff to sort out. We might come on to that. Thoughts on all of this? Lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Tony, says, Ian, both statements are true. There is a credible threat. And also, we've not told any candidates to stay away. Police chiefs playing with words. I don't think the police did say there was a credible threat. If there was a credible threat, they would have told everybody to stay away.
Yeah, I think I mean, we don't know, do we, really? I mean, the police have said there wasn't a credible threat. Nigel Farage said he's staying away because he felt uneasy. He's quite entitled to do that.
Of course he is. And by the way, I tend to agree with Nigel Farage not showing up. I can see how it would have been a pantomime. You know, at best, it would have just been a lot of jeering and booing from people who didn't like Nigel. It would have been a charade in the sense that you'd have had a bloke with a bin and a fella with some animal on his head or whatever, just some bloke dancing, gesticulating, God knows what. It wouldn't have been a very dignified... I don't blame Nigel Farage staying away. Again, the point I made earlier, and Tony, who just sent that last message, I also agree with and can completely see how Tony has got to that conclusion. We're living in that world now where the distrust of... Tony wouldn't have thought that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But now that's how we're in that place, because we've seen ineptitude at heady levels. We've seen it in all sorts of areas where the old bill have royally messed up, and not necessarily by design. I don't really care what reason it was, but we've seen those cases where you think, how did they not nab this person, or how did that person get bail? I know it's not always specifically the police's fault, but that's the place we're in, and that's the point that Reform are kind of dining out on at the moment.
Absolutely. And when you get... You've had so many attacks and murders of politicians. I can understand why Nigel Farage is feeling a little bit vulnerable.
Yep.
And even the fact that he's had all these death threats on top of that will make him feel vulnerable. But then he looks at this and goes, I'm just going to get a shed load of hassle here.
Yeah.
So perhaps he's just thought, I'm not going to play into their hands.
Yeah.
I've probably won the seat. I'll have a lie in and deal with it later.
Maggie says, I agree with Chris. The bin voters are just Nigel haters. What the bin's intention did... what was the bin's intention? Did he have a mandate? In my opinion, that bin has insulted the people of Clacton. He had, of course, stood before. He stood in Makerfield.
He did, yeah.
So that was against Andy Burnham.
Andy Binham, yeah.
Andy Binham.
Yeah.
Is that the first time you've said that?
Yes.
I like it.
This time in the morning
Where
as
has
well.
that been hiding? This one from Daniel, who's in Israel. As a British-born Israeli watching from afar, people like Count Binface remind me of the England I love, the amazing British sense of humour and how much beauty Britain can offer the world. What makes Britain a laughingstock is actually the not-so-small boat crisis, the woke madness and the complete surrender of major political parties to Islamic extremism. Enjoy while you can, because I'm not too sure that much of the great British humour will be around much longer.
Absolutely.
There is that perception. Although I am told, when you speak to somebody in France, they kind of do tell you quite a parallel story about kind of wokeism and immigration, and so, but then, you know, they're only over the water.
Yeah, as we know from the migrants coming across that little stretch, yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Let's go to Mike in Durham. Mike, how you doing? Morning.
Good morning, Ian. Not doing too bad.
Good. What are you thinking?
Right. David's the second establishment person this morning to suggest putting up the cost of people entering politics. Now, I know the establishment want all of us poor plebs to keep in our lane and just do as we're told. I know, even for me, the number of candidates was rather ridiculous. But this is how we do things. We are allowed to put our names forward to become MPs. Right? We know they want to price us out.
Yeah.
They've tried it before. This is the establishment's way.
Who do you think, Mike, who do you think are the establishment? When you hear that word, what does it mean to you?
Well, you've got your political class, your politicians, you know who they all are. You've got your media people.
Because in a weird way, in a weird way, Mike, Andy Burnham is sort of making a similar point, isn't he? He's talking about the Westminster bubble and that lot down there and how they've done business for years, and he's going to change it. It's not so far away from the point that Nigel Farage is making.
No, Andy Burnham saying he's not part of the Westminster bubbles like me saying I'm a Southerner. It doesn't.
I think you're from Brighton, Mike.
I am a bright one, but I'm from Durham.
I love that. Nice answer. Dave, you are part of the establishment.
Well, yes, people always think you're part of the establishment if you work in the media, which is not necessarily the case, because our job is to expose the establishment when they do things wrong, and we've done that with Andy Burnham and with governments past and present, and the problem for Nigel Farage, and when he's being attacked by other sections of the media who want to attack him, then they're entitled to probe the expenses and the funding of any party they want. And we've seen it about Labour, we've seen it about the Conservatives in the past. So it's just a case of a journalist getting some information and going for it. Usually that information starts with a tip-off to a journalist from somebody opposing the person about who they're giving the information. True. And then the journalist decides whether or not to dig into it.
Mike, what do you think of... Because something that has always disturbed me for a lot of years, initially over a different story, but at the moment we have quite a lot of people who call themselves independent journalists, which often means not a journalist, but nonetheless, you know, anyone is allowed to investigate, and it's great that people go on social media or they have YouTube channels or whatever, and they do their own thing, and some with levels of success. But does it bother you, Mike, that bearing in mind a lot of these people fly under the banner of anti-establishment because the establishment lies and the establishment doesn't tell you the truth, and then they produce their online shows full of more lies and untruths than you could ever cram into 30 minutes.
Have you watched some of the, we'll call them independent media? Some you've got, like, I've got a simple saying.
Yeah.
Question everything. Right?
That's very true.
I tell people on my major places, I tell them, even question what I tell you. Look for yourself. Yeah. Check it out.
But then you don't want to see a red under every bed, do you? I mean, you could go mad thinking, yeah, there's one over there.
Well, there are some people who probably think that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got people who've got Nigel Farage living in their head rent-free 24 hours a day.
That's very true. Mike, great call. Loads to digest in that. Thank you for that. That's Mike in Durham. And by the way, I'm a big supporter of those kind of independent channels or independent media, whatever people want to call it. I think that's great to have in the mix, but they are opinion-led as distinct from what you might call fact-checked and fact-led. You know, they always, often, their opening line is, you know, no bias, you know, tell it like it is, the full truth, you get that. And I've got mates who do this, you know, a couple of notables, and anyone who knows me or knows us know exactly who I'm referring to. I love the fact they've enjoyed success and doing well, but there are lots of others that are merely just opinion, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, but it should be. And then, of course, you have people, you see the comments, people go, thank goodness you're there telling the truth, and it's like, no, they're giving you their opinion. To you it's the truth because you agree with the opinion. And that's the sort of weird swamp we found ourselves in.
Absolutely.
This is not some authentic, greater, more authentic media. This is just opinions that you agree with. Because if you're of a different political view, you watch the same video and say it's a load of trash.
Yeah, you get, particularly in the field of political journalism, and, you know, you and I have worked in there and know what it's like. You get some journalists who are clearly client journalists, and they represent a party. Yes. They are passionate about socialism or about conservatism, or whatever it might be. I mean, I won't name current people, but you know that then person A is never going to get a story given to them by the Conservative Research Department, because all he or she does is slag off the Conservatives and praise Labour. So Labour will give that journalist loads of stories, knocking the Tories or beefing up what the Labour Party's doing. Yeah. I'll give you one example of somebody who no longer does it, is Alistair Campbell. Yeah. When he worked as a journalist, all he ever did was put out handouts from the Labour Party, knocking the Conservatives, and the Conservative backing journalists who do the same. And he wrote a column which was always on the same sort of lines, and then he actually went away for the Labour Party. Yeah. And that's fine, that happens. Other journalists just get on with doing the job and trying to cover it in as balanced a way as possible. Yeah. And if they get a story knocking one or the other, they'll go for it because it's a good story. Yeah. I saw one the other day, and no names on all of this, completely breaking the laws of the land of contempt of court by getting into detail that just simply you're not allowed to do. And now that it would still be illegal, even if it was put on the internet, in YouTube, Twitter, whatever. That would still be illegal for anybody to do that. If you stood in the middle of the high street and shouted, "That man is guilty because I went to school with him and I know that he's always tortured old people," or whatever, then that would also be contempt of court. But it's interesting. I would just like, in terms of getting to the truth, that some of those places have to play by the same rules. I don't mean Ofcom rules, because Ofcom rules
mostly are just common sense, but then there's some stupid one, like this business that we have to read out 30 names in a by-election, is not just ridiculous, it's utterly insulting to everyone's intelligence that you can't even, as we go closer to it, you can't even mention, yesterday we couldn't even mention the word Clacton without fear of the Ofcom boys coming for you and going, you've breached the rules. It's like, no, we haven't breached the rules. People are adults here, grow up. Yeah. But all the other stuff about sourcing material, and you know what it's like. You know, when you come across a story, you make phone calls, right? You're in a you make phone calls. You don't just... People think that, you know, I've got a load of newspapers here. There's a school of thought that people think a bloke just sits at a desk and writes anything they want. Now, you know what a newsroom rollicking looks like from an editor if you get it wrong. You know, as if you will have your what's it's torn from your body metaphorically if you get it wrong, because your editor will go, well, you didn't check that, you didn't source it, and then source it again, and sometimes a third time. You know, the lawyers, the law of the land, the right of reply from someone, all of that stuff, and sometimes it's a faff because you know something is true, but you've got to make sure you go through it, because otherwise you're going to end up with a bloody great big legal case on your hand, or egg on your face. So...
Well, I've had the reverse of this a couple of times, and they're really agonising, where I've got a story I know is true, and I can't get confirmation. In fact, I get denials from the government of the day and from the person it's about.
Yeah.
And then 6 months down the road, you found out it was absolutely 100% true because something else emerges which confirms it. But because we cannot get it confirmed, we don't run the story. That's how it is.
Indeed. Do you know what really annoyed me as well? I don't often get annoyed by this, but I saw a couple of characters arguing. There was a kind of talk radio in crisis story. You know,
again.
Yeah, I know, exactly. One of those. It's like, and it's always great. That kind of stuff doesn't bother anybody. But and it was about they've lost all their listeners. So this show that I'm doing now is Jeremy's show, of course. Yeah. Okay. Let me just, for clarity, kids, the listeners to this show has increased by 25% in the last year. So from a year ago to today, 25% increase. You wouldn't think that or know that if you listen to some people who've taken some moody figures, morphed them, changed them, mucked around with them to come out with a completely different headline. Check it wherever you wish to check it. I wouldn't be allowed to say that on air. My boss would kill me if I said it and it wasn't true. Ofcom would kill me if I said it wasn't true. This breakfast programme has 25% more people listening than this time last year. That's just a fact, OK? Radio listening is a curious beast. They go up, they go down, they wobble a bit. That's happened forever. Sometimes it's not even down to the specific person who's doing it. I mean, I've worked on radio stations where, you know, somebody who's absolutely bloody awful has got the best figures that when you think, how did they do that? And then the other way around, somebody who's clearly brilliant took it down. So, yes, they do mess around. All figures do. Television figures do. Circulation of newspapers, you know, trying to get to the science of what really happened. What about the person that read the newspaper 500 times in the doctor's waiting room? Do they not count as readers? You know, all of this, there's loads to get into on that, but I just wanted to put that out there on behalf of Jeremy, if nothing else. This is not my show, of course. I'm back on 1 o'clock in a week's time, so yeah, happy to go into that little
Talk
rant.
TV have done a Clacton. They've increased their majority.
Absolutely right.
By 20-odd%. Very good. Well done, Talk TV.
Good to see you, Dave. We will speak soon. David Wooding with us here on the programme. Charlie Rowley joining us next, and we're back to Clacton as well. This is Talk. Not so small boat crisis, and there's a picture of the boat, and they've got a little little wording in a little circle that says picture continued on the back, and they've actually put it, it's so big they've put it across the front page and the back page of the newspaper. I mean, this is absolutely huge.
It is. By definition it is. It's and they're getting bigger all the time.
Getting bigger. What's
I'm not really sure that you can call it a small boats crisis anymore.
It's a 49-foot dinghy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning, welcome back, everybody. It's Friday the 14th. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. Collins in for Carl just for one more day. He's back on Monday. And, of course, the result of the Clacton by-election is in. Nigel Farage is victorious again, increasing his votes. It was a smaller turnout, but his vote still increased. The bin-faced person got himself trousered nearly 10,000 votes for his bin-based troubles. More on that story. What is the significance to you of this? What do you make of it? Do you see this as, and remember how this by-election came around, as a victory against the establishment? Or was it always a no-brainer that Nigel would romp home? Yesterday was the hottest day of the year. The heat wave continues, but it's not all sun cream and seasides. There were fires across the UK, from woodland to entire houses, the weather exacerbating the problem. More on that. We also hear the weather, by the way, was possibly to blame for the train derailments in Lewes in Sussex. Many people were hurt in this, 2 people very seriously. They're looking at the potential of buckled railway tracks. There is some visuals of this which look beyond extraordinary, but we will wait for the finer detail. And elsewhere, Reform UK have accused Vodafone of facilitating the invasion of Britain, their words, after it emerged that the company has been supplying free SIM cards to give to Channel migrants. The telecom giant has given 2,500 SIM cards so far, loaded with 6 months' worth of free data. Is this a decent charitable endeavour, or is it the classic well-worn thing of companies showcasing their caring credentials? I think we know what's going on there. Details to come. Charlie Rowley has walked into the studio, I think in probably a diary clash on his part, frankly, but it just suddenly turned up. Wasn't on my running order, Charlie, and in he came. I thought, what's he doing? And then he started talking to Dave Wooding, and I'm very uncomfortable about this.
well, luckily Dave has left his notes here.
Has he really?
So I'll be the voice of reason. I'll be a fountain of knowledge.
Absolutely. For the first time ever. Good to see you, Charlie. Listen, I mean, it's a by-election. Farage was always going to win the by-election. He was always going to kind of win in the way he's won. It's no surprise to me that he's slightly increased his vote. The bin-faced man, which was, of course, a protest vote for people who didn't like Nigel Farage, he got 9,455 votes. He retains his deposit. Pretty much everyone else would have lost their deposit on this, 500 quid down the Swanee for their troubles. But Farage is back. Has he proved anything with this? Because that was the whole point of this.
Look, he'll certainly say that he has. Look, he called the by-election. He wanted the people of Clacton to have a verdict on him, given all the scrutiny that he'd been under.
Yep.
And look, it seemed to be a bit of a masterstroke at first, and then the other parties, major parties, the Tories, Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, all said, actually, no, we're not playing part. This is your by-election that you've called. It doesn't, get you off the hook for the Parliamentary Standards Committee that will still need to investigate you. And it seemed as though it was going to be then just Nigel spending his summer competing against a man with a bin on his head, which has been the case. But the way in which he's got the result that he has, I think Nigel will be very happy this morning.
Indeed. Turnout down by roughly about 14%, as I can see it here. Had the Tories... if Labour had stood, it would have made no difference to the Farage vote. It's not as if there were people that would have been voting for Labour that suddenly decided, well, I might as well vote for Nigel now. But although you do get those kind of quirks. Conservatives, if they'd stood, did any Tories, do you think, lend their vote to Nigel?
They might have done, but given that Nigel's increased the vote that he got in 2024 when there was a Tory candidate,
yes.
It doesn't seem that way.
Was he increased it with a? So it would be a higher percentage, wouldn't it? Because a smaller turnout, higher votes, so it would be a greater percentage than he got before.
Totally, yeah, and just a higher number of physical votes. So if you are that sort of Tory voter that sort of wavered, or so I mean, look, the people that voted for Binface, he's got those 9,455 votes from somewhere. That would have, you could imagine, come from the Labour vote that's in the constituency and other maybe left-wing parties. So I mean, the reason why that matters is because if there is a second by-election, because this is now the whole game of chess that seems to have been played during this whole thing is that if the Standards Committee actually then, the Standards Commissioner, I say, recommends that action needs to be taken by the committee then of MPs will put that to the rest of Parliament, and it will be for the whole of the House of Commons to vote on whether they want to suspend Nigel, and then that'll have to go to his constituency, and his constituents who will, if they get 10% of the electorate, so I think that's about 80,000 people, so they only need 8,000 signatures to say, yep, we want another by-election.
There is a school of thought, not proven in any form, but just speculation, that the Standards Committee, if they find against Nigel, may well... it may well not be in the most extreme way they could find against him. And you've got various options at that committee. Has this man broken the law of the land and broken this and therefore should be kicked out of Parliament? Or is it something that would be diluted somewhat in order to avoid a by-election? So this will be the establishment helping Nigel Farage in a way.
Absolutely. And look...
if that was...
Absolutely. And look, Nigel has been able to, I think, as he's trying to say today, look, this has been the establishment versus him. He's got the result from the constituents. That's all that matters. If the other parties, he will call them the uni parties, all ganging up on him, if they continue wanting to play the game, then that's entirely up to them. But, it just plays into a narrative that they're all out to get him.
Chris says, I don't blame Nigel for not standing at the count. Nobody with a real brain would stand next to those fools. Absolutely bang on, Chris. I wouldn't stand next to them either. Let's talk to Samara Gill, talk reporter who's live in Clacton for this morning. Samara, good morning to you. You've been covering this throughout. And just to pick up on that, you're in a different location now. You're still pier-based, but the dress is on. The shades are on, and it's a summer's day in Clacton-on-Sea. Still one or two people knocking around. And, of course, right now you speak to us as the result is fully confirmed as of about an hour ago that Nigel Farage remains the MP for Clacton.
Yes, absolutely. Ian, I've had my coffee. I'm feeling a little bit more awake, that's for sure. And I'm out here on the beaches of Clacton. I've got some sort of issue to bring up with Nigel, the now coronated MP. There's no reception. The reception in this town is so patchy. You can be, somewhere over there and absolutely have none, and then over here have perfect reception. But I tell you what, I've got a treat for the audience. I've got someone who voted in the Clacton by-election next to me. Hello.
Hello.
How are you feeling? Nigel has won.
Yeah, well, yeah, he hasn't done a lot for Clacton, but I think he's probably the answer for the country. All right, mate?
We're about to get run over behind us. But anything for the channel. So you voted for Nigel.
Done a lot for Clacton. There's too many derelict buildings that should be done up for young people, to give young people somewhere to live. He hasn't done any of that. So he hasn't done a lot for Clacton. But he is the answer for the country, because I think he's the only person who says things as they are. It's as simple as that.
And the £5 million donation problem, which kind of triggered this whole by-election, is that an issue for you?
No, I accept that most politicians are in it at the end of the day for the 100,000 a year that they get. And so everybody's in it for money. And if it was for his security, and let's face it, look at Anne Widdecombe. She could have done with 5 million, couldn't she, for security? She's dead. And so, no, I don't. I think he was entitled to accept it, and I'll go along with that. Don't bother me at all.
And he didn't show up to the count. Do you think that was a little disrespectful to your vote, or do you think that was fine?
Yeah, he takes us for granted. He takes us for granted, but I still think... Well, I still think that reform is the answer. Or the other lot, if they get together, you know, that I can't think they're in a Resur or whatever they call themselves. If they get together, they'll walk the next election, because most people are fed up with the boats. They're fed up with them doing nothing about it. And now they're telling us, if you've got a few bob and a nice house, we're going to put a load of immigrants in your garden. It's not on.
No, absolutely. I think it's interesting is that if there were to be another by-election in a couple of weeks, if Farage is found guilty by the Standards Committee, this all seems very Westminstery, to be honest, would you go and vote for him again?
No, but I because I think if he's found guilty, his deputy, I've watched him on television. He's
Richard
good.
Tice.
He's good.
Yeah.
And I think he would be standing. So I'd be voting reform, regardless. You could put a collie dog up with reform on it, I'd vote for it. You know, I think reform's the answer.
There you go.
My wife would say you're an idiot.
She didn't vote for Nigel?
Yeah, she did. Yeah, of course she did.
But
yeah.
she still...
She still thinks I'm an idiot. She's entitled to. Is this all going over?
No, that's actually really, really interesting insight into the mind of the Clacton reform voter. You can see here that they are so disenfranchised by the rest of Westminster, by the rest of politics, that they will put their trust in Nigel.
Or his deputy, or someone from reform.
Someone from Reform.
Yeah.
And just quickly, there was a sort of Restore Reform pact that was put on the cards a week ago before this by-election took place.
That'd work.
You think they've called it off, though?
They're going to have to watch it, though, because we don't want the real right-wingers. We don't want 1939 again. We don't want the real right-wing people. But we want people who are leaning that way, who hold the country dear, for want of a better word. And I think reform and restore are the answer.
And
but you've got to watch them, because they could go too far.
Yeah. Is that with the anti-Semitism?
Yeah. That's it. There's a little bit of Jew in me, so yeah, I feel strongly about that.
And what we're referencing there is just some of the allegations of anti-Semitism that have hit Restore. But there you go, Ian.
The Labour Party, they've been anti-Semitic for years.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Jeremy Corbyn.
No, exactly. That doesn't make it right, does it?
He'll sue me, won't he?
No, he won't. Don't you worry. Ian, back to you.
Yeah.
That is a Clacton Reform Britain voter.
There it is. Samara, thank you very much. Hands back to me just as the lawsuit's pending. Thank you. Book that man for the paper review next week, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I liked it. It was quite brave of our Australian reporter to pick a man with a Kiwi baseball cap. Of all the people in Clacton, there's a Kiwi. He won't know much. Turns out he's not a Kiwi, and he knew loads. But he spoke... I thought what he said was really interesting there. There was a couple of points. He began by saying, look, Nigel Farage hasn't done much for Clacton. Constituency MPs can rarely get things built. That's not really their brief, is it? They're not there to... They can urge and they can agitate and they can encourage and they can write letters. But if you've got an area that's a bit run down, the local MP can highlight it and do their best and even help campaign on it. But it's not really in their gift to change that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, as an MP, you are effectively, campaigner-in-chief for your patch and the legislator for, the country. You've got to take part in national votes that take place, forms our laws nationally.
But interesting, you don't have any legislative control of your own constituency.
Exactly, and you can campaign, because it's the local authorities, the local councils that will give the planning permissions to new builds and housings, or if you want to convert old buildings, as that gentleman was saying, that he wants to see more of those buildings turned into homes or areas for younger people. That's a local authority issue. I mean, our councils do an awful lot and can do more and actually have more power to transform the local area in terms of how it looks, in terms of the housing, in terms of its adult social care, in terms of schools and highways, and it's not just about collecting the rubbish. So local authorities have got all of that kind of power. But you're right, as a local MP, you can champion in some of those causes and campaign for some of those causes, and put your constituency on the map and get it into the headline news if you're talking about it in Parliament at a national level. But yeah, I mean, some of the things that gentleman was obviously asking for will be things that I'm sure Nigel will take away and want to campaign for locally and nationally.
Yeah, and he made the point there that he would. It's not really about Nigel Farage as such, because he said he would be happy if Richard Tice was running the party. But it's Reform. Reform are the only party, I don't think I'm misrepresenting his words there, that reflect the views of real people. That was his point.
Yeah, and, you know, that's an interesting one, because I think actually a lot of people still see it as, you know, Nigel Farage's Reform show. You know, he's obviously appointed people to shadow positions. So obviously Zia Youssef is the shadow sort of Home Secretary, and Rob Jenrick, you know, defected from the Tories, is their shadow Chancellor, effectively.
Yep.
So there are people in key positions, but I still think the majority of the public, they turn out to see Nigel. When they think about Reform, it's all about Nigel. And so I think it would be difficult as a political party if Nigel was to take a step back and someone else was just to suddenly pop up. Certainly at the minute, anyway. So I might disagree with that gentleman on that. But broadly, I think he was onto something where, you know, if you're going to have a very clear choice at the next general election between a Labour government or a left-wing sort of government, you know, a coalition, or you want to get rid of that government, then the right and, you know, centre-right-minded people, whether that's previous Conservative voters in Clacton, who now maybe have switched to Reform, or that kind of combination right across the country, I think those parties have got to get their ducks in the row in order to ensure that they're focusing their guns and their campaign weaponry, as it were, on the right people.
Don in Stalybridge says, morning in, the Clacton result will bring out the SNF. Stop Nigel Farage brigade in force now. I was reminded of that because obviously, I mean, if you're a Labour activist or a Conservative activist, then you wouldn't really deny that claim, would you? Say, yeah, absolutely, we're going to try and stop Nigel Farage because we want to beat him at the election. That is their job. I think Don is referring to a sort of wider group, this establishment thing. I was reminded as well back in and this really predates me as well. Well, it predates me in terms of my experience of it because I was a kid. The SDP back in the day. Now, you are a student of politics. What's your own knowledge of the Social Democratic Party from the 80s?
Well, this is a breakaway group of people who left the Labour Party, because I think the Labour Party became too left-wing.
Yeah.
And they broke away and formed the Social Democratic Party, I think, that then went on to become the Lib Dems.
Do you remember who was, or can you recall?
Shirley Williams.
Shirley Williams,
Roy
correct.
Jenkins.
Correct.
And...
David.
He's in the House of Lords. David.
Can we do it, Charlie Rowley? You can do it. I'll give you a choice. A, Smith. B, Jones. C, Owen.
Owen.
Correct.
Yeah.
Roy Jenkins, that was great knowledge, considering you were merely... your parents hadn't even met back then, let alone you being born. Roy Jenkins. And there was another one, Bill Rogers, who never gets really mentioned in this. It was known as the Gang of Four. Poor old Bill. What did he do wrong, Bill? Nobody mentions Bill.
The Gang of Four, yes.
The Gang of Four. But they, at the time... I was reading something about this recently. It wasn't quite the same thing as sort of Reform starting, but they were seen as the rebellious party, and there were claims that the establishment would not support them. They would do anything they could to stop this. Who are these upstarts who think they can somehow mess with the system? And they broke away largely because they didn't like the cut of the jib of the Labour Party. They had, in a much more polite way, I suppose, back then. But they had a similar kind of vibe going around them, that they were, you know, this was a group of people that were battling the system.
And I think it was all, you know, as you say, it seemed to be our politics was a bit more polite, I guess, back in those days, but they didn't really seem to have a real figurehead. You know, Nigel Farage has been in this game a long, long time. You know, he stood in about 8 or 9 now elections at a national level or and at a European level as well. So probably more than 9. But he is someone who has just galvanised support over many, many years, and it's become not just policy, and it's not just about immigration, but it has broadened out to where there is so many issues that people feel in the country, and he's been able to articulate the problems, and that's why he's been able to galvanise so much support.
We're going to take a brief pause. We're back with more. Charlie Rowley is with us, reflecting on Nigel Farage's more than convincing win on that rerun of the election in Clacton, by-election. he's back as the MP with an incredibly convincing win. Details on that. What does it mean going forward? Thoughts on that and your response as to how this thing panned out, particularly with 30-odd candidates, most of whom were dressed up as if they were turning up to some kind of fetish party. We'll have details on that. In fact, one of them I recognised. Years ago. Feet. We move on. Charlie's back with us in a couple of moments' time. This is Talk.
Sex space is on biological sex.
Yeah.
And therefore you cannot have people going into a women's space, which is for women only, who is not a biological woman.
I was wondering whether that interview was conducted on April Fool's Day, because I think it was a new low in the sort of...
A new low for low?
A new low for low, because, I mean, just the absurdity of not being able to ask a very basic question about the monarch of our country.
UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
26 minutes after 7 o'clock. Good morning, welcome. It is Talk Breakfast. You're waking up to a Friday morning. Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle for the final day. Jezza is back on Monday. Charlie Rowley is with us. Have I just said Charlie Rowley is with us? Did I just say that? Or have I not said it yet in this section? Am I repeating myself? Am I going Clacton delirious?
You can repeat it. I think you
Clacton delirious. Sounds like a diagnosis. Yeah, I'm very sorry, sir. What's wrong with me? You've got Clacton delirious.
Did you catch that from that man of the past?
The man with the hat on. That's where it came from. Have you gone Clacton delirious this morning? Nigel Farage hasn't gone delirious. He's the victor and a convincing win as well. He's increased the percentage of his vote. It was a lower turnout, but he's got 1,000 more votes than he got the last time around. The nearest rival, and even that's a joke to say rival, was Count Binface, because he was really the sort of protest figure that was put up. And now, of course, people go, he was put up by the establishment. Now, old Binface has been at this for a while. It's not, he just does this stuff. He did it in Makerfield, didn't he? Against Andy Burnham.
Yeah. Oh, he's been around Count Binface, and so he's not a first-timer to these kinds of things.
He's not a first-timer. He's a well-established character. Let's get a voice note on Clacton. This comes from Jay. Morning, Jay.
Morning, guys. Great show as always. Well done, Nigel and the team and everyone involved. Onwards and upwards now. Now let's watch. Let's watch Labour and everyone drag out the 5 million gift from his friend. That's going to drag on until they need to use it. That's when it will drag on. I mean, it's a bit of paper. Just get on with it. All this red tape and messing around. That's why it takes us years to do anything in this country. Absolute joke. What I will say is the Conservatives, Restore, didn't field a candidate, as we know, like Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, etc. But what I will say is Conservatives and Restore, you helped reform. You've helped reform. So you think you're being smart by doing this. I'm really shocked at Restore not fielding a candidate, being a new party. They would have, chances are, they would have come second and beat Count Binface, which would have been great for them.
That's a really good... Jay, thank you, mate, for that. That's a really good point. Why did Restore not stand in this? Was it about just would it have been too much of a Well, let me put it this way. A humiliation for Restore. Would it have really cemented the view that Restore are really the wannabe pups of the picture, and Nigel Farage is the Don who speaks for that contingent of politics?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, given the relationship between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, before, even though Rupert Lowe extended a half-hearted, I would argue, olive branch recently, before that by-election was called, they were still, very much leading their respective parties. And I think, look, if Rupert Lowe's vision back then was to sort of become the party of the right, because he thought that his ideas are better than Nigel's, I think running a candidate in Nigel's own backyard, where Nigel is incredibly popular, and to lose, as Restore would have done, I think he probably didn't want to take that gamble.
Let's get a word with Joe Twyman, founder of Delta Poll. Joe, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
I don't know what we take from this. I mean, we've only an hour ago got the results. Some people thought it was going to come a little earlier than that. Poor old Charlie here in the studio with us was booked on a down-market broadcasting outfit and had to stay up for 3 hours when nothing happened. Having said that, we've all been there when you're hoping for an early result, but it came through just after 6 o'clock, or around about 6 o'clock. A win for Nigel Farage. No big surprise in that. What do we extrapolate from this result beyond a win for Reform?
Well, I think you can look at it in terms of good stories for Reform and bad stories for Reform. In terms of the good stories, it was a win, as was expected, and though it was expected, if the last 10 to 15 years of British politics have taught us anything, it's that nothing can be guaranteed, but a win is a win, and in time, as time passes, very few people will remember the actual result. Another good piece of news for Reform was the fact that Nigel Farage increased the total number of votes on the last election. 1,000 more or something like that. That's a good news story for them. But bad news in terms of the numbers, less than 2/3 of the vote, more than 25% of the vote for Count Binface. And another good story, Reform managing to get turnout up, or is that a bad story because people were motivated for him to turn out? But actually, in terms of all of this, what it's about is not the numbers. It's about the stories that emerge from this. I think the story around security and not turning up at the count will be a bad story for Reform. And I think there are other issues around whether this election should have taken place at all that will raise questions. Ultimately, though, I'm not sure any of this will have a massive impact. I imagine this will be a talking point more than a turning point, because in actual fact, most people aren't paying attention. It's the middle of August.
Yep.
And people have better things to do.
Well, it was also the hottest day of the year yesterday, and lots of people, I can imagine, when you've got your swimming trunks on, you don't normally think, oh, where's my biro? I'm just off to vote. It's not something you necessarily... Where would you even keep your biro? There's another story. So maybe people were put off somewhat by the weather in that respect, Joe. It's interesting...
I'm sorry, I've lost my I've lost my earpiece. I can't hear you.
So you can hear it, nothing... Nothing Joe's end. We'll try and get Joe back ear-pieced up. I was going to make the point, Charlie, that so Nigel Farage's percentage of the vote is now 63.34. In 2024, it was 46.2. Now, of course, that's as a result of him retaining the amount of votes, but a lower turnout, means he's eaten up a bigger percentage, but he'll take that. It's interesting that it was only in 2019 that the Conservatives won that seat, 72.3% of the vote.
Yeah, and the candidate, who then obviously went on to become the MP, Giles Watling, had worked that seat time and time again. So he'd been the candidate, the Conservative Party candidate, for many years before that, I think, and been working that seat incredibly hard. And of course, Clacton has a history, because it is a Conservative thinking seat, but also a very, I think, right of centre seat.
Yes.
So very much voted for Brexit. Had Douglas Carswell as its MP, who was a Conservative, who defected to UKIP, called a by-election, and Clacton voted UKIP in that by-election. So it has that kind of feel to it. The Conservatives have got to, and that's why it would be interesting, I suppose, if there is a second by-election on the back of all of this saga. The Conservatives say they will field a candidate. How far Kemi has been able to attract voters for Clacton to vote for the Conservatives again by taking it sort of to the right, by saying we want to leave the ECHR, scrap net zero and all the rest of it, would be interesting to see. But I think Nigel has got Clacton very much sewn up, I think.
It's interesting. I mean, Giles Watling, nobody can criticise him for his... I mean, he's been around there since about 2014 when he first stood against. He lost, as you rightly say, to Douglas Carswell, went again in 2015, because it was a by-election 2014, 2015 general election. Carswell won that. He was nipping at the... Watling was nipping at the heels at that point, but he came good in 2017 and won the seat, won it again in 2019. But, of course, it was the fateful 2024 election that saw the Tories kicked out. But the Tories were still getting 12,820 votes back then, 27, nearly 28% of the vote. We've got Joe Twyman back with us. Joe, we've got you back, earpiece all fixed nicely. I mean, had the Conservatives stood, I can't imagine they would have got anything like 12,000 votes. I mean, they certainly didn't achieve any kind of significance in similar reform seats since. What would have happened had they shown up? It would have been an embarrassment for them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I actually grew up just down the road from Clacton, so it's a constituency that I know very well. And I also know that analysis in the mid-2010s showed that it was, of all the constituencies in Britain, the one that was most likely to vote for UKIP, which of course is why Douglas Carswell chose to run there in the first place. And so what we have is a constituency that is very much orientated towards reform, which is why Nigel Farage ran, and with the Conservatives not doing particularly well, it's unlikely they would have mounted a serious contest. But having said that, it's still not a good look that this contest was, for many people, not seen as a good look for this contest to be taking place at all, given that none of the major parties stood. But I imagine that won't matter to supporters of reform or Nigel Farage.
And of course there could be another by-election.
Yes, we could in 3 or 6 months' time have this all again, and I assume at that stage the major parties would run. But of course, all this is about this idea that the establishment is against Nigel Farage and the establishment is against reform. And so having another election will simply feed into that narrative that they are promoting. Whether people agree with that or not will depend very much on whether they are for reform supporters or not. It's a very partisan decision. I don't think they will win many people over with that position, and that's an issue for them because they, over the last few months, have dropped back in the polls, and many polls have them level with Labour. Some now have Labour ahead, and the 25% roughly that they're on in polls now is not really enough to have chance of getting into Downing Street as things stand. And so will this be enough to change that? I think it unlikely.
We will see. Listen, Joe, thank you for your time. Always appreciated. Joe Twyman, founder of Delta Poll. What I don't get about this Standards Committee, why it takes so long. I mean, there's obviously, it's a question really about declaration of a donation. So it's not this bit isn't a legal matter, as I understand it. I mean, I know that the police have looked at other elements of funding. You know, there are legalities around funding political parties. That applies to everybody. But broadly, this one is about whether he broke the parliamentary rules. How hard is that to establish? I reckon you could have that done in half an hour.
Yeah, and I think, look, the 5 million donation, which obviously a lot of people know about, that's what's been in all the press over a couple of months now, I think it must be. People know about that. A donation was given to Nigel Farage. He says it's a gift rather than a donation, so there's the element of semantics around that. Nigel obviously claimed that was also for security when he wasn't even an MP, but also, you know, I think as in interviews where he's been slightly rattled, has obviously said it could be used for whatever he wants because that was money that was gifted to him. I think he sort of admitted earlier on, or was very open, I should say, in an interview that I saw him do earlier on, where he sort of said, if it's just about signing a bit of paper, which he didn't do, where he should have just declared, OK, yes, I was given that within the 12-month period before I became an MP,
Yep.
but I received the money long before I even thought about running again. So it wasn't, in his mind, it was irrelevant. But to the standards and whatever the Parliamentary Standards Committee expects, okay, I didn't sign a bit of paper. Are you really going to then call for a by-election because I didn't sign one bit of admin? That's the narrative that I think he's now going to pursue, just to try and avoid a second by-election, because I think secretly he feels vindicated by calling this one. He's won big, and he'll just want the story to be
one would
won.
have thought, I mean, I know it's a lot of money, £5 million, but I mean, is that relevant to the way it's dealt with? I mean, if it was £1 million or if it was £10,000 or 100 grand, would that be, surely that would be the same alleged offence regardless of the amount you've committed, and therefore the penalty would be the same. And if we were talking about a 50 quid donation, would they seriously be talking about expelling him from Parliament over 50 quid? So are they likely to be seduced by the heady numbers involved here?
Potentially. I mean, it is a big number, but I think it's excuse me, it's more about the it's not about the size, but it's about the declarations.
Yes.
So, you know, people we have I just think very high standard that we expect of people who are in politics, certainly running for politics, but then becoming MPs. We want to know where they're getting their money from, just to make sure that there's no sort of funny business.
I sense that Parliament and the committee will say we can only go by what the rules are and apply them like you would in a courtroom. They are the laws. But whether there's wiggle room in sanctions and what they do with it, I imagine there must be some. I can't imagine that committee deciding at the end of it all, yes, you've done this, Mr Farage, you are kicked out of Parliament, there's going to have to be another by-election. I can't imagine that being the case.
It depends. I mean, Parliament is a funny old place, and it comes down to the politics. And if you are someone who, really, if you're on the Labour benches, the Lib Dems, even the Tories, if you really dislike Nigel and you want to make him suffer personally, then it might be ill-advised, even if that's what you want to do, to say, no, we're going to send him to have another by-election and we're going to make this the proper one and we're going to field candidates. I fear that might backfire, actually, because I think people will be not wanting another by-election in Clapton.
Absolutely. It's costly. It's a waste of flipping time. Charlie Rowley is with us. We're going to take a brief pause before we do. Let's get a voice note. This comes from Jane, who's in Clacton. Morning, Jane.
Morning, Ian. The by-election results, I think Kemi Badenoch's got a hold of head in shame, and I hope the polls reflect that. I think the dirty tactics and the uni-party holding hands has become quite plain for all of us that are interested in politics to see, and I really do hope that yet again they get battered at the polls when the time comes.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning. Coming up on 7:45. It is the home of common sense. Let's get some calls going. We go to Clacton. Where else? Morning to you, Bob.
Good morning, chaps.
How's it going?
It's the morning.
Yeah.
It's great.
What are you making? What are you making of this by-election on your patch?
Well, it's a morning where we find out that the count didn't count. Okay, so
that's a fair point. I like that. The count didn't count.
Yes, because at the end of the day, it still seems odd to me that the rest of what I call the uni party, the mainstream political parties, unanimously decided not to contest this seat. And I still find that very odd, because when it comes down to, I mean, imagine now if the Mr. Binface, or whatever he calls himself, had actually won the seat. Can you imagine his maiden speech in the House of Commons?
You wouldn't hear it.
It would have brought the whole of Clacton into disrepute. Yeah, I'm sorry,
true.
but that's what would have happened.
Did you? Was there any part? Because I never thought he was going to win it, Bob. But did you ever speak to anybody who thought he might?
I have been on various elements of social media. There has been a campaign, quite heavy campaign actually for Count Binface, but it's purely been, in my view, just a protest vote. You know,
of course
not,
it has.
It's not been. The guy didn't have a leg to stand on, let alone bin.
Well, he didn't really, and it was, even if the Tories and Labour had put a candidate up, Nigel Farage would have still won this, and I think he would have still won it by the same kind of numbers. I don't think there was any Labour voters who suddenly voted for Nigel Farage.
I just think it was an act of political cowardice on behalf of the opposition parties. Nigel Farage is a very popular guy up here. They would argue that, he never spends any time here. I've met him several times, and I had a couple of pints with him actually in the Jaywick Clacton area, and he's very interested in what's going on here. I don't see how anybody could actually just negate him and just say, look, he's only in it for the money or whatever, because, I mean, as people have pointed out on your show before, look what's happened to other politicians.
Sure.
He's got a big entourage of people with him.
Yeah.
And when it comes to it, I mean, he needs that kind of protection, because I've been stood next to him in outside a Clacton pub where he's had yogurt thrown over him, and a female comedian said, she wishes it had been battery acid. That sort of comment is totally.
Was that from? That was years ago, wasn't it? It was Joe Brand.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So that was even back then. I mean, I didn't realise that was in Clacton.
Yes, it was. It was outside a JDW pub.
Wow.
And I was stood there virtually next to him when it happened. But he was campaigning at the time. He hadn't been actually elected. So
was he campaigning for UKIP back then?
No, he was campaigning for to get the Reform Party up and running. As in my memory.
In my head, that battery acid comment was like a decade ago. I must have.
No, it wasn't anywhere near as. I think you might find it was about 6 or 7 years ago, because But in any event, nobody should be subjected to that sort of.
Absolutely, and I remember speaking to Nigel about the second milkshake moment, because he's had a couple of these, of course, and more recently one woman did get found guilty of assault, I think, because she threw something at him, which I think was another milkshake. But I remember talking to him on one of these and said to him, when that happened and somebody threw that at you, was there a moment when you thought this might not be milkshake? And he said yes, which of course there is. When somebody throws something at you and you're a high-profile politician, you hope it's a milkshake in a curious way, but it could easily be something else.
Yeah, I know, but listen, I sense optimism here now. Hopefully this will all go away. Bearing in mind that we've had an ex-Prime Minister who's had to pay back some money to a colleague or a friend of his who bought his suits and his spectacles and things like that. So isn't that an act of...
Did he have to pay that back?
He paid about £6,000 of it back, apparently.
Did he?
Yes. Mr. Starmer, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't mind somebody helping a mate out in politics. My problem I had with Starmer was that they dined out on the fact that we're the party that doesn't do things like that. Remember, that was their whole thing. You know, they didn't even know millionaires. We don't know these people. It turns out they know loads of them. Of course they do. And they took the hospitality, they took the suits, they took the glasses, they took the Taylor Swift tickets. They couldn't help themselves. When power came knocking, they lapped up every scintilla of it.
Absolutely, and it's hypocrisy for them to turn around and say that. So Nigel took a donation from somebody who wanted his best interest at heart before he even became an MP. Yeah. I don't think the Standards Committee will do anything about this because they really haven't got a case to answer. In terms of Nigel
I think even if there is a case of, look, the timing of it, you know, Nigel, you should have declared it and you didn't. I don't imagine, and, you know, if that's the rule, then that's the rule. I don't think that would be a political decision if that is the rule. But I don't think he's going to be massively punished by having to be kicked out of Parliament and have another by-election. We will say, Bob, thank you. Really good intel from the ground there. That's Bob in Clacton. Thank you to him. Let's get a word from Peter Barnes, who's not in Clacton, but joins us nonetheless. Peter, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Well, this has panned out exactly. I mean, we could have written this a couple of weeks ago. Nigel Farage has won. He's won convincingly. He's increased his vote. We know the other parties didn't stand. The turnout was lower, so therefore his percentage obviously is higher. Has it done what Nigel Farage set out to do?
Well, that's a really good question because you're right. His vote has gone up, but not by the amount that I think it personally needed to. Now, last night, everything was trending very much in a big Farage victory. This is what he needed. As I like to say, and I'm going to be very careful, I'm going to try a sports analogy. Nigel Farage is Man City playing at home with a full-strength squad against a conference division team who are part-time and the captain has a cigarette break at half-time. That's the kind of competition this really was, like on the ground. So the question of Farage winning was never really the actual question. It was, what was the victory going to look like? And when Nigel Farage has only increased his vote by 1,014, you start to wonder, was this actually this resounding and overwhelming, to quote Mr. Farage, victory? Because that's a little bit of a stretch, if you ask me, because when 1 in 4 people decide to put an X in the box for a man who has a bin for a head, a joke candidate, I think there's a bit of a problem here. And we'll have to wait and see how the reform actually play this, because I think the actual damage here isn't necessarily no candidate was stood by any other political party. It's that Nigel Farage is taking victory laps against beating a bin. And I think that is not great on the grand scheme of things when this guy wants to be the Prime Minister.
And, of course, the reason for this was the narrative that Nigel Farage advanced on this, Peter, was it was him versus the establishment. And his point was, well, if you want to find out what people think of me versus the establishment, I'll have a by-election. And if people believe me and they have faith in me, they will vote for me. Now, it isn't the greatest of tests to go to your already existing home ground and the safest reform seat in the country to do that. But I can see why he felt that's where he had to go. Has it achieved that? Has it achieved a result? Not just the election result, but a result in Nigel Farage 1, establishment 0.
I personally will say no to that. I don't think it has, because the vote share looks very impressive. But like I say, when you're only increasing by 1,000 votes on your home turf against no real opposition, that's not exactly the resounding victory. I always say he needed Clacton to roar like a lion. It needed to be heard in SW1 in every corner of that area. And unfortunately, I think we got the laugh of a hyena at best. And I think this is going to be a bigger problem when we move forward, when the Standards Commission does return, because I agree with what you've been saying so far. I don't think they'll make him do another by-election, but I don't think that's Mr. Farage's biggest problem. I think it's the fact that if this comes, the ruling goes against Mr. Farage, I think what will happen is people get to say, you lied to Parliament. They have a verifiable receipt of him not being open and honest and transparent. That is 10 times more fatal than making him run in another by-election. Because I compare it to Jeremy Corbyn leading the Labour Party to be the institutionally racist party that it became. You know, that moniker never went away. That was a real loss of moral authority. It was a loss of his ability to attack. It also meant that the party itself, the Labour Party and Reform, would be in this similar situation, where every question to every candidate will actually revolve around this particular issue from now on. You know, if they, you know, it'll be, do you agree that Nigel Farage lied to Parliament? That's going to be
Would he have lied, though, if he just simply said, look, I read the rules and I got this gift, but I got it, you know, way before I was ever considering going back into politics. So that would be an error. Is it a lie?
Well, again, we'll have to wait and find out, because...
And did he lie to Parliament? I mean, he might have...
Yes, so, again, it would be not disclosing information, but I do think when there's been reports in the Times saying that he had had conversations about this, but the Electoral Commission and the Standards Authority have to really come out with a clean answer as to when is a person like declaring themselves up for election. Is it actually putting them on the ballot paper, or is it any time before that? There's no actual kind of solid line on this, but it would be interesting, because I do think that the idea that this Uniparty didn't stand because they were scared of him, I don't really see that as the defining factor of this, because realistically, why would they put up a candidate if they think there might be another by-election?
Okay.
But also, they need this moniker of the kind of the judgment against him to actually weaponize. I think that's what they've been waiting for.
That's going to be interesting. Let's get a voice note here, Peter. Have a listen to this. It's George in Clacton. Morning, George.
Morning, Ian. Hope you're having a good show. George from Leicester. It was really interesting. Samara was interviewing that gentleman, saying about what was happening with reform, and he would still vote for reform regardless of who was in power. I actually think he made a valid point. If this does come out that Nigel is guilty, the only person that can take that party forward, and I really like him, is Richard Tice. Anyway, have a good show, mate. Bye for now.
And it's been said before, of course, Richard did temporarily lead the party when Nigel did step down. Now, I've known Richard for a while. He is one of the most honest, decent, intelligent men on the circuit. I like him an awful lot. He's a good communicator. Nigel is obviously very different. He has something that I don't think politicians from any other party have. To be honest, he's got a very mesmeric, charismatic way of giving a speech. He's a very convincing operator. But could Richard? I mean, I don't know why we're talking about Nigel Farage's demise, but it came up from an earlier interview that Samara did with a constituent in Clacton who said that he's not a massive Nigel Farage fan, but he is a Reform fan, but he also likes Richard Tice.
Yeah, so this is the why Nigel Farage ran back to Clacton, because he's got that faithful vote. When you extrapolate it nationally, he has a very high unfavourability rating. At one is -43 according to YouGov, it's -34 according to Ipsos. What is the danger, actually, is that the Standards ruling doesn't make more people dislike Nigel. It's that people who already don't like him are confirmed in that opinion that they already have of him. That's the danger of the Standards Committee. And when you're that unpopular, it would be then difficult to convince people that you're actually a decent bloke. So yeah, in Clacton, people may like him very much, but it's his home turf. That's the reason, you know, for that. And I thought it's a very valid point about Mr. Tice. But again, he's also been implicated in the financial issues. Mr. Gendrick has as well. So this is a bit of a rot, and I do think what actually needs to happen for reform is a bit of a clear out in terms of its operations and actually clean this stuff up, get some firewalls in there, get some proper protection for candidates and MPs, and move forward. This is a moment for reform to kind of take accountability and move and actually be decisive. Well, I wait and see whether that happens.
Peter, thank you as ever. Great to have you on. Peter Barnes with us, political strategist, a regular with us on the programme. Lots of people have been implicated in a story. Is that, I mean, I wouldn't just say establishment journalism. There's been some absolute tripe and rubbish, just basic, awful journalism around this that stands up to zero scrutiny. I think that should be said as a matter of fact as well. 0344 499 1000. We're going to get the news at 8 coming next.
welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of its desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. 3 minutes after 8 o'clock. Welcome to the home of Common Sense. Friday, the 14th of August. Colin's in for Kyle for one more day. He's back on Monday. One story, of course, dominating the news agenda. And why would it not? A huge victory for Nigel Farage in the Clacton by-election. He's back. And it's sealed, and there is no doubt about it. What does that mean going forward? Your thoughts if you're in Clacton. And the continuation, of course, of the comments from Nigel and Reform that this was very much the people versus the establishment. What's your takeaway? Also, yesterday was the hottest day of the year. It's going to be hot today as well, by the way. The heat wave continues. Not all sun cream and seasides, of course. There were some fires across the UK, from woodlands to entire houses. The weather exacerbating the problem. Details to come. We also hear the weather could have been to blame for that terrible derailment in Lewes in Sussex. There were many people hurt in this too. Very seriously. Buckled railway tracks are being investigated as a possible cause behind this. And elsewhere, Reform UK have accused Vodafone of facilitating the invasion of Britain after it emerged that the company supplied free SIM cards that were given to Channel migrants. There's no real surprise here. The telecoms giant gave 2,500 SIM cards, which contained loaded cards with 6 months of free data. Is this just a very nice, decent, wonderful, fluffy, charitable endeavour? Or is it the classic well-worn thing of companies showcasing their virtuous credentials? I think I know where my money is. Lots to get through here. 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note on that number as well. We're crossing live back to Clacton in just a couple of moments. We're right across this story. Samara Gill is there. We'll come to her in a moment. Firstly, Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, joins us. Morning, Richard.
Good morning to you, Ian. It's very bright, sunny and cheery, and there is a celebratory mood here in Clacton. An outstanding result for Nigel Farage. Given that all by-elections have much lower turnouts than a general election, to secure some 1,000 more votes than he got 2 years ago shows that the good constituents of Clacton have basically humiliated the establishment and the mainstream media. And you know what they've said? They've said, we want more Nigel, not less Nigel. And that's a remarkable thing.
And 63.34%. I mean, that's... We don't see those kind of numbers in majorities much anymore. It is huge. It's authenticated the very purpose that this was set up. The nearest rival, of course, was the fellow with the bin on his head, Count Binface, who wasn't really a candidate at all in the conventional sense. And, you know, we all know what happened. You know, it was a protest vote. I appreciate he stood against Burnham as well, but this became the sort of totemic place where disgruntled people who don't like Nigel Farage would go. What a wasted vote that is, but nonetheless, that is democracy. He hoovered up 9,500.
Well, that's right. That is democracy. But also democracy generally involves turning up to the election. And the other main parties, Labour, the Tories, the Lib Dems, they didn't turn up. They bottled it like a bunch of cowardly chickens. And in so doing, they were greatly rude and discourteous to the Clacton constituents. And sure, not everyone's going to like a particular candidate, in this case Nigel, and they were left with having to vote for a bin. And I just think it is a grave discourtesy. What it actually shows is that all the other parties, they threw themselves in the bin, literally. And the idea that we could now have another by-election clearly would just look utterly ridiculous. And I think that the establishment needs to, frankly, take a long, hard look at itself. And look, there's a Parliamentary Standards Commissioner's investigation. At the end of the day, we're all innocent until proven guilty, supposedly, in this country. But the establishment seem to have presumed and prejudged that Nigel's guilty. I mean, Kemi Badenoch says she'll have a candidate in the second by-election. Well, how does she know there'll be a second by-election? There won't be, there shouldn't be. It's done. It's over.
I wonder whether that committee, and Lord knows what they do over there in that committee in terms of the time and effort. I think you could have this thing done and dusted in about half an hour, frankly, but, you know, don't let that stand in the way. Don't let logic and common sense and procedure stand in the way of the parliamentary system. I mean, so this could be months. And what on earth are they going to be doing for those months? I think, actually, Richard, and I don't think this is necessarily the committee being generous to Nigel, I don't think it's going to come to another by-election. Whatever they decree, I don't sense that they will want the indignity, if nothing else, of seeing Nigel victorious for a third time in less than 3 years.
Well, in my view, he is innocent, and they should decree that he is innocent of the charges for which he's being investigated. In the event that they decide otherwise, it's then for the committee to make a recommendation to the House as to how many days there may be a sanction. There's a lot of water to pass under that bridge. But frankly, I'm clear, Nigel's clear, his advisors are clear that he's abided by the rules, and we all just need to move on. We've got a great conference at the beginning of September. We're going to be announcing lots of brilliant policies in the run-up to that over the next couple of weeks and at that conference, and we're very excited. And we're starting to creep back up in the polls. The burn and bounce seems to be heading south fast as thousands more illegals cross the channel in ever bigger cargo ships, it seems. And, we've got a situation where killers of emergency workers are going to be released early because this Labour government is incapable of deporting foreign national offenders. There's about 10,000 of those. Incapable of building Nightingale prison places. All the policies that Zia put forward at the beginning of the week, and these are the ways that you can keep violent, bad people in jail.
It's all logical stuff, but it does seem to, for whatever reason, we often use that phrase, the uni party. If you wanted to be more polite, OK, the Conservatives and Labour both have, frankly, blood on their hands on this one. These releases, these curious decisions that are made, where you'd imagine at least one grown-up in the room might say, perhaps we shouldn't do this. That doesn't seem to have happened. It's gone on and on and on. Just on that point, Richard, you're confident that a reform government, you've already made some robust predictions about what you would do with the channel. So on a story such as this, I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that none of these people that we're talking about, these horrendous criminals that have done the most awful and horrific things, none of these people would be released early under a reform administration.
Correct. That's the whole point of our policy. And that's what Zia has clearly put forward. And it's doable. But you have to have a can-do, make things happen attitude from people who've got a successful track record in the world of business, getting stuff done. And I think that's what voters want. They're tired of waffly politicians. They want people of action, men and women of action, who are going to say, yeah, do you know what? It might be a bit tricky, might be a bit difficult. No one else might have done this before. But we can do it. We can make it happen. It's literally how it's how a nation, it's how the world and how the human race progress, by accepting challenges and finding ways around it.
Just back to Clacton for a moment. Nigel didn't turn up for the count. Reform said they were advised not to go by Essex Police. Essex Police have said they didn't advise any candidate to stay away from the count. What's the story here?
The real story is, despite the sort of he said, she said, the real story is that Nigel's security team are responsible for keeping him safe, secure and alive. And I say that obviously with the hesitancy of the horrors that we've seen in recent weeks. And ultimately they have to make the judgment. And their judgment, which I fully support, was that this count was going to be a very, very tricky environment where who knows what might have happened. And that the sensible thing to do for everybody, but in particular for their charge, Nigel Farage, was to keep Nigel away. And there's no one who loves to celebrate more and to engage with people than Nigel. So it's not a course of action that he chose lightly. But it's just the sad reality of where we are today.
So it wasn't the police didn't advise, it was Nigel's own security team that said this is probably not
ultimately, the police can say what they do or don't want. They're not responsible, ultimately. It's Nigel's security team that are responsible for his safety.
To be honest, Richard, I wouldn't have gone if I was Nigel, and for many other reasons than just the absolute seriousness of security. I think there are enough kind of candidates and characters there, and we heard the whooping from the crowds of people who got 7 votes, for goodness sake. By the way, I think all of them, apart from the bin bloke, lost their deposits last night, so what a waste that was. But their fan base were in the room. I think it would have been a charade, frankly, and one that I would imagine Nigel Farage was best to stay away from.
I think the thing about a charade, when there's lots of people like that, and people will it's impossible to know how things may play out in that sort of environment. People get a bit excited, and it's just the safer thing for everybody involved. And we respect democracy. 33 candidates opposed Nigel, and some got more than others. That's all absolutely fine. But ultimately, we're just living in a very difficult time physically, and that has to be taken into account, and I hope everybody can just respect and understand that.
Yeah, one person got 7 votes. For a fleeting moment, I thought, oh, maybe the Tories did stand after all, but it turns out it was an independent. There we go, Richard. Good to see you. Have a great weekend. Congratulations to your man and your party, Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, with us on the programme. Let's go back to Clacton. Talk reporter Samara Gill is over there. Morning to you, Samara. You've changed the scene again. I like this. Every time we speak to you, you're in a different place. This is brilliant. You've got the seaside behind you now.
I got to work hard for the money.
Absolutely right. Yeah, where are you going to be next?
Ian,
Actually,
I'm working overtime.
Are you going to be in the sea next time we speak to you?
I mean, I don't want to traumatise the viewers with what that looks like, me in my bathing suit. I might hop on that what's it called, Ferris wheel thing.
All right.
Maybe next hit. You'll just have to stay tuned.
But
we
yeah,
will
see.
It's looking to be a beautiful day in Clacton. Well, we will see. Looking to be a beautiful day in Clacton. I'm here with the lovely Keith. He voted in the Clacton by-election that you were just talking about with Richard Tice. Keith, are you happy with the result?
Yes, I think so. I think Nigel Farage has probably he got a better result than he did in the last election, so he's increased his vote on a lower turnout.
And you were saying to me off camera, that you didn't really have any other choice because the Tories, the Greens, Labour, the Lib Dems, they didn't take part in this by-election. They called it kind of a farce. What would you say to that? Do you feel kind of disrespected by them, or do you think that this was kind of the only way it was going to happen?
I think they were scared of the result, and so they all put their weight behind Binface. And although he did OK, he was miles behind Nigel, and so I think that just reflects if there's another election, which there could well be in the next few months, then maybe they might get egg on their faces again.
Nigel's had this constituency for around 2 years. Do you see any improvements? Are you liking what Farage has done within this area? You say that he comes once every kind of fortnight, which you're kind of impressed by. Is Nigel good for Clacton? Is this just going to be a continuation of what's been going on?
Well, he certainly put Clacton in the spotlight, and when you look at previous MPs we've had, they've not really done very much. So he's regularly here. Unlike the sort of social media, everyone says he doesn't know where Clacton is, but I've seen him a number of times personally, and he writes in the paper every week on what he's up to and keeps us informed. I know he's helped 1 or 2 organisations get funding, and the local Citizen Advice Bureau was going to close because of lack of funding, and he got sponsors, and so that's been kept open and help the local people. So I think he's been doing as much as anyone else. The other thing is they say, he doesn't hold surgeries. Well, I understand 130 other MPs in the country, they don't hold face-to-face surgeries. It's always done online or by phone. So I think they just like to pick on him.
Now, Keith, I can't not ask you about this £5 million donation, which, of course, kind of started this by-election from taking place. Does it bother you? I mean, he claims to be man of the people. There was this £5 million donation that came out that wasn't declared. Was this a problem for you when you went to that ballot box and decided to vote?
Not personally. I don't think, it really affects things. Other people get bungs. £5 million were given to the Labour Party by a Green campaigner who then got contracts.
Dale Vince.
Dale Vince, that's right, yeah. And he got £124 million contract given by the government. So, if that's not buying votes, I don't know. But, it just seems to be the same thing with every party. They take donations from all over the place. And, I think the Lib Dems, with Ed Davey, he gets money from the asylum seeker hotel owners, and that's why he's always looking for safe and legal routes.
We don't know exactly about that, but yeah, I mean, there have absolutely been articles and allegations and rumours. We can't substantiate that. But you're right. There is a lot of corruption in general that happens in politics. Do you think Nigel will be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
No, I don't think so.
And why is that?
I think the establishment as such is so much against him that there's going to be ways to try and bring him down or stop him, or I think maybe he's got a chance, but I just don't think that luck is on his side for that. I think maybe things will happen that he's not able to do it, or he stands down. I don't know.
There you go, Ian. That is another great insight from a Clacton reform voter, Keith there. Thank you so much for giving us your thoughts on the show today. So, yeah, it's very interesting. It doesn't seem like the donation is a big issue for people, and it seems that there is... Some people think he's going to be the next Prime Minister. Some people think that he hasn't got a chance and that the establishment will win against him. I guess time will tell, Ian.
Samara, we're back with you again shortly. Lord knows where you'll be. Might be in a diving outfit at that stage. We'll wait and see. Snorkels at the ready. Samara Gill, talk reporter, who's there live in Clacton for us this morning. And just a couple of points I should clarify there, of course. From Nigel Farage's position, it wasn't a donation, it was a gift. Had it been a donation, therefore it would have been declarable. It wasn't declared because it was a gift. And that is the kind of grey area that we're in on this. Deeb in Red Hills says, I don't understand the difference between gifts for Keir Starmer, clothes, glasses, use of luxury apartments, etc., and £5 million. It was a gift. They all accept gifts in whatever form. It's the declaration that is the issue. You can accept a gift or a donation. Declaring it is the issue. It happens a lot, actually, where not to any huge level. Often somebody is late declaring the gift. So they're doing their... is it once a month they have to put in their paperwork and their expenses and stuff? Somebody's given them a cinema ticket in their constituency. Oh, come and see Odyssey. There's a ticket for you and your wife. And you're meant to declare that. Of course, that should be declared. But you forget to declare it and you declare it on the next one. And that is essentially a breach of the rules and you'd be reprimanded for it. So it's all about the declaration. Nigel's point is that he didn't have to make a declaration because it wasn't a donation. It was a personal gift. The parliamentary system argues, as I understand it, that, OK, let's say it was a gift. That's fine. But once you decided to go back into politics, you were duty-bound to declare anything you'd received in the last 12 months. And he extrapolates from that, well, yes, if it was a donation, I would have done, but it was a personal gift. That's centre to the question. 0344 499 1000. More from you in a couple of moments as well. Loads more to get through your response to Clacton. Let's get a voice note on this. On Nigel Farage, it comes from Carl. Morning, Carl.
Hi, Ian. Carlinbury. Come on, let's just be honest about this. We all know it's establishment stitch up against Farage. Like you said, the amount of money is totally irrelevant. The inquiry is all about whether or not he should have signed this piece of paper or not. It's just ridiculous.
Current affairs, international news, letting criminals off while sending... Oi! Oi! You shut up! I'm trying to record something.
Stand by for 3 powerhouse hours of breaking news, challenging views. I don't give a flying damn about international law. I think people will viscerally reject this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. It's Talk Breakfast. Trying to eat some breakfast here, for goodness sake. It's that kind of morning. You've got no time to eat, sit down, stand up, do anything. There's too much going on. This one here. From Craig, who says, morning Ian. Anyone saying Nigel Farage beat a bin is showing their lack of knowledge. The bin had the vote of all the other party supporters put together, so Nigel has beaten all of them in that respect. I mean, you could analyse it like that, because people who were protesting and didn't like Nigel Farage, whoever they happen, we'll never know who they happen to be, but would have lent their vote to the story that became, for curious reasons, quite high profile, that it was a man with a bin. But of course, people didn't vote for the bin because he's part of the bin party, and we all know philosophically what the bin party stand for and where their political weather vane is pointing. This was the man they wanted to damage, Nigel Farage. So, yes, Craig is correct. You would have a conglomerate of all manner of people that would have previously been supporters of other parties voting for the bin. I can kind of understand why Nigel Farage did not want to attend his own victory announcement. It would have been, I mean, the optics would have been terrible for him. Because it wasn't just the bin, of course. Some of those independents were dressed up in wacky stuff. It looked like some kind of weird, I don't know if it was sort of like a cross between the Masked Singer and a 1980s fetish party. There was all sorts going on there. Would you want to be in a photo with that lot? Let's speak with Kevin Hollinrake, MP for Thirsk and Morton, chairman of the Conservative Party. Kevin, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
I mean, a little bit of fairness to Nigel Farage. Would you have turned up at a by-election if you had to be photographed with 30 oddballs?
Probably not, but I wouldn't have put myself in this position in the first place, Ian. We should never forget that this election, this by-election, was about one thing and one thing only, and that's a £5 million donation gift, personal donation gift, landed in Nigel Farage's bank account. And as you were saying earlier, quite rightly, there are rules in Parliament about accepting any kind of monies, not least £5 million, and property declaration of those kind of monies. There was a process for that. The investigation was taking place. The Parliamentary Standards Commissioner was investigating whether Nigel Farage had broken the rules or not. Instead of subjecting himself to the same process as everybody else in Parliament, every other one of those 650 members of Parliament is overseen by that process. Instead of that, he decides to have this by-election. I mean, it has a hissy fit and call this fake by-election. That's what has happened. It's cost the taxpayer £250,000, and he'll still have to subject himself to those rules anyway. I don't know if he knew that when he decided to call this by-election. That's the reality. Nigel Farage is always, and you quite rightly, Ian, and I, myself and many other people want to see single-tier justice in this country, not two-tier justice. To have that, everyone's got to follow the rules. The rules must apply equally, and Nigel Farage has tried to avoid scrutiny and avoid the rules. That's what this is all about.
But you talked about the cost of this and the taxpayer responsibility for it, but your party would like another by-election, right?
Well, it's not a case of whether we want one or not. The rules are set out. It could be the case that the Parliament Standards Commissioner, if he concludes his investigation, as I think he may well do now, if he finds Nigel Farage guilty of an offence, the Committee on Standards, again, more members of Parliament and lay people, make a judgment on the seriousness of that offence. That could then lead to another by-election. That's a process that is followed. It's not one we can choose or avoid. Nor should we try. If there's another by-election, of course, a proper by-election, not a fake one at the choosing of Nigel Farage, of course, we would stand a candidate in that election. That's what will happen. But that's because the rules at that point in time will have been followed. This is all about Nigel Farage trying to avoid scrutiny over that £5 million personal donation gift, whatever else it is.
But
that's
it
wrong.
isn't. You know what Parliament is like. You've been around there long enough. I know you've got your own investigation about breaching the parliamentary code. And I'm not making any judgment on that, and I'm not trying to be mischievous by raising it, but errors can be made, can't they? Errors can be made. I'm sure you will tell us that there was an error of judgment or some box wasn't ticked when it should have been. Errors can be made, and they are clerical rather than conspiratorial.
Well, I won't tell you anything about the investigation because I'm not allowed to talk to you about it, Ian. And but I'll tell you this: I will subject myself to the process. I've I'm very happy to be judged by the same standards as everybody else. Now, this is what this is about in terms of Nigel Farage, is about £5 million, a personal gift, donation, wherever it was, and whether he followed that process. And those processes are not simply about ticking a box on a form. This is about conflicts of interest. And parliamentarians are required to disclose any interest they have, particularly one of £5 million. I think there's a lower threshold of £200 where you don't have to declare something that's given to you, but £5 million, clearly you do. Now, and I say, there are rules around it. There's an independent person, a Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, who I have great faith in, will make a fair decision and judgment based upon the facts. That's the process that's supposed to be followed. Nigel Farage has deliberately tried to avoid that process by calling this fake by-election. Those are the facts.
Why are you allowed to talk about his investigation and not your investigation?
Well, I'm not talking about the details of the investigation other than what's been publicly reported, of course, and I am not allowed to do that either, nor is anybody else. So I apply the same rules to Nigel Farage I do to myself. As I said, you asked me about the investigation into me. I accept there is one, and I'll be held to account by that process, and whatever sanction I get from Parliament, I will absolutely comply with.
Back to Clacton, it was a convincing victory. Whatever way it came around, it was unconventional, Kevin. It was a bit strange for some people. Lots argued it was totally unnecessary and a waste of money. But he's back. He's got an increase in his vote share and the amount of people that put their tick next to his name. That is significant, isn't it? Whatever, even if you don't buy into the establishment versus reform or Nigel thing, it's significant that whatever your party say, whatever Labour Party say about reform and that narrative that these aren't the real deal, people in their thousands are voting for them. And we saw it last night in Clacton. How do you articulate an argument against democracy?
Well, I don't, but democracy must be observed by us all. And democracy also includes how we're held to account in Parliament. People elect us to Parliament, they expect there to be rules that we abide by. I don't think you could call this result in Clacton significant because it's not a true by-election. It's a fake by-election that was brought about by Nigel Farage, where all the
It's still a by-election, though, isn't it? It might have been more authentic if you'd stood a candidate.
Well, none of the major parties put forward a candidate, including Restore. Rupert Lowe decided not to put a candidate because he said it's a fake by-election too. So no serious political party sees this as a proper by-election. It is simply a mechanism for Nigel Farage to avoid the same scrutiny that applies to everybody else.
But he doesn't avoid it because it now starts again, of course. So the Standards Committee investigation now picks up from where it left off.
Well, that may well be the case. I don't know if Nigel Farage realised that at the time he had his hissy fit and call this election, or maybe he thought Parliament would just cave in the face of the great Nigel Farage in terms of him being judged by the people. That's not how the process works around conflicts of interest in Parliament. It's very important. Those conflicts of interest, you expect people, when they stand up and speak about anything, to be able to properly declare any conflicts of interest they have. You would expect that. I expect those rules that are very, very clear. And indeed, in a previous occasion, in a previous Parliament, one of my colleagues was just not to have done that properly. And I was very keen to make sure that person was properly held to account. These rules must apply to everybody, whichever political colours you wear.
Kevin, thank you for your time this morning. Enjoy your weekend. Kevin Hollinrake, MP, Conservative Party Chairman. Thank you to him. I can tell you that Kevin is being investigated over, it's not a money thing, it's over an alleged breach of Parliament's Code of Conduct. He's being investigated for allegedly lobbying the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards over the independent officer's decision-making. So that's what we're dealing with there. Kevin said he couldn't talk about the detail, but did have quite a lot to say about the detail of Nigel Farage. Make of that whatever you will. This one in from... we've got so many here. From Peter. I'm happy this morning because the vile left are fuming at Nigel's win for a second time. We need a general election now. There might be one, you know. I know the world, or the country seems divided on will there not be a general election, but there's a sense to me that if Andy Burnham is going to pounce, then the next 6 months is his only opportunity to, if he thinks he can win, the next 6 months. After that, It's a downward spiral for Burnham, I promise you. Betty says, while I agree the by-election was a well-managed stunt, interesting note, he got just under the same amount of votes as Andy Pandy, the mayor in the UK. You mean in the Makerfield by-election, I guess? Yes, yes, absolutely right. Reform leader got 22,239. In 2024, Nigel got 21,225. Andy Burnham got 24,927. So we're in the same ballpark of people. And if somebody wants to say it's not an authentic election, if you want to talk about by-elections that are worthy of a bit of a discussion, then none will come higher up the list than Makerfield, given how it happened and why it happened. That, to me, will be the biggest by-election story for the rest of time. Not this one in Clacton. The one in Clacton was a simple win for Nigel Farage. Doesn't matter whether you hate him or not. Doesn't matter whether you liked the fact that he called one or not. Doesn't matter whether you're annoyed about the waste of money. I think the Andy Burnham by-election is by far worthy of more scrutiny. Let's take a brief pause, get a voice note before we do. It comes from Ian. Morning, Ian.
Hi, Ian. It's Ian from East Grinstead. Talking about the committee reporting on the 5 million for Farage. I mean, they're going to spin that out for as long as they can, simply because it keeps it in the public eye. And apart from anything, I think, as other people have said, it's going to be, they're going to find him guilty irrelevant of the actual facts, because of look at the makeup of the panel. It's hardly independent, is it? They all the people who are on that party, on that panel, represent parties that are scared out of their wits of Reform and Farage.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 25 to 9. Simon says, Kevin Holland-Rake showing us that the Tories haven't changed. The sleaze party calling out Nigel Farage, not because they think he's done anything wrong, but because they hope to run him out of politics. What a plonker, says Simon. And Ernie says, it's my birthday today, and I've been given a few presents. I'm thinking of going into politics. Who do I have to speak to declare my gifts? It's a very good point. Would it have changed the terms of this debate if it had been a birthday present? So if somebody gives you a card with 5 million quid in it, you know, when you open up the card. Do you remember the devastation when there was a card without something in it? That was just awful. You were really hoping, you know, surely your Auntie Maureen can give you a fiver, at least. Yes, that's a good point. Let's speak with Edwina Currie, former Conservative minister. Do you remember all this furore back in the day? Edwina, declare this, declare that. If somebody gives you a cinema ticket, you've got to declare it. I know things did change with the expenses scandal a bit, but do you remember at the time there being a kind of theme of robustness and scrutiny over whether somebody offered you a bag of chips when you were on a walkabout in your local?
What I do remember, good morning, everybody, good morning, Ian. What I do remember is that when I fought the election in South Derbyshire, for example, in 1992, after we had brought Toyota to replace the old coal mines, I had 32,000 electors, not 22,000, wow. 32,000 electors. And in fact, the returning officer said to me afterwards, we were considering whether we should just weigh them for you. That's what an election victory actually looks like. To come to your question, actually, the Register of Members' Interest was introduced fairly early on in my time as an MP. And I had received a box of black hosiery from Courtaulds, which was a company nearby in Derbyshire, because I had complained that I'd been interviewed about what it was like being a woman MP. There weren't very many of us. And I had said, oh, well, one of the problems is having, you know, so much dirty washing in 2 locations and never having a pair of tights without a hole in them. And Courtaulds' reaction was, we can't have this from one of our local MPs. So they sent me a very large box of really high quality hosiery. And I said to them, oh, I've got to declare this. So I did. I put it on the members' register of members' interest. And as you can imagine, it caused a stir. Did I imagine that might happen? Sure.
Well, yes. I mean, that would be something to be reprimanded over a pair of tights, wouldn't it? Goodness me. I mean, you mentioned you made some, you know, political fun, and understandably at the beginning there, talking about, you know, that's not a majority. This is a majority. And, of course, there are stonking majorities. I mean, I live in Sevenoaks, Edwina, for goodness sake. I mean, you could put a blue rosette on a chimpanzee and it would come back with a majority. With all respect to Laura Trott, by the way, who's a fabulous local MP, I should say. But, I mean, there are areas that will naturally garner bigger majorities than others. Nigel Farage still won, and he won convincingly.
He made a complete fool of himself this summer. He didn't need to call that by-election, and he spent the entire summer fighting a bin who got nearly 10,000 votes, which is, you know, that is the winner, I suspect, actually is Clacton, because the Count Binface stuff went all over the world, and there are many people around the world, especially in the States, that are looking at Clacton and saying, rather nice, you know, maybe we'll go there on holiday next year. So I think Clacton actually looked rather nice in the sunshine, and Clacton itself is the gainer. Farage made a complete fool of himself. He treated his constituents with total contempt. He didn't even bother to turn up to the count. This story about, oh, there was going to be the police had told him to stay away. It was complete nonsense. The police have said it's nonsense. And as a result, he is now back in Parliament, where there will continue to be the investigation of how come he trousered £5 million and didn't notice.
Well, it's a gift, isn't it? I mean, we were saying just before the news, you know, you get birthday gifts. I mean, you don't necessarily think, oh, down the road I'm going to become an MP, so I better declare my gift. That's the distinction.
Oh, well, there were just a couple of days in between getting the gift and actually deciding he was going to be an MP again. I mean, it's all complete rubbish. He decided to hide a donation, a political donation of £5 million, and there were others as well, so that he didn't have to answer the kind of questions that he's having to answer now. Nobody gives a donation of £5 million without having some very good reasons and expecting something in return. And the question is, you know, was the money dodgy? I mean, the bank actually reported it to the National Fraud Agency.
But that's normal for those kind of fees, right? I mean, you put a transaction through, then it will be flagged.
You would have thought that Nigel Farage, who has had banking problems before, if I remember rightly, that he would have been alert to this. The money went
Well, he was debanked, wasn't he? He was told he couldn't bank because they didn't like the cut of his jib.
The money went to fund his party. And you're talking about not just this £5 million, but many, many millions more. It comes from some kind of very dodgy back. I mean, the obvious question.
Well, it comes from a rich guy, Edwina. There's a rich man likes Nigel Farage. Let's say he thought, OK, Nigel's dropping out of politics. I want him to stand.
Ian, the real worry here is that the money is coming from some outside malefactor that wishes this country ill and is relying on the idiocy of people supporting Nigel. They're not all idiots. Many of them were Tories once, and I hope that they may sometime be Tories again. But the worry is that the money is coming from some kind of outside malefactor, like, you know, the Russians or somebody like that, somebody that wants this country in a mess and wants us to hate each other. That's the real worry.
Is the real worry, though, for your party? Are you still a Conservative, I should ask, Edwina? I mean, I assume you are.
I am the president of High Peak Conservative Association. I don't speak on their behalf. I'm very proud that they've asked me to do that for most of the last 10 years. Is there a worry for the Tory party? Actually, the moment we get back into Parliament and Kemi is doing Prime Minister's questions every week, she is going to be brilliant again. If you look at the polls, what you are finding is that actually this summer has been a disaster for reform. They've gone down slowly in the polls. Andy Burnham's Labour Party, as you would expect with a new face, has had a little bit of a bounce. But what has continued her steady, gentle, and really reliable upward rise is Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives. We still have a lot of explaining to do. I'm absolutely sure about that. But the longer that Labour is in power, the worse of a mess they're going to be, because they're socialists. They can't help making a mess. We can do it an awful lot better.
Isn't the reality, however, when it comes to things like immigration, reform are well ahead of the game? They've got their plans. They're going to get robust and stop the boats. You can mock their naval plan. It's not been tried and tested. I appreciate that. But people believe in them. The Conservatives presided over this mess. They don't seem to have any solutions to this. You've got stories such as Vodafone, who are helping facilitate it by giving SIM cards loaded with 6 months' worth of credit to charities that work with migrants. I think even yourself yesterday got into a bit of hot water by suggesting we need to open brothels near migrant camps. I don't know whether you still stand by that statement, but some would argue, you might have just being mischievous with that, Edwina, I don't know. But reform are the real deal when it comes to the biggest thing that people are concerned about. That's my point.
Well, it's not the biggest thing that people are concerned about. The biggest thing that they're concerned about is actually the cost of living and the NHS. They're worried about whether they can pay the bills.
But it all feeds in, doesn't it? It all feeds into that. You bring a 250,000 people into your country, then it affects the NHS. It affects the cost of living.
That's absolutely right. And indeed, I think, if I remember rightly, the first British minister that started bringing people in from overseas to work in our NHS was actually Enoch Powell. Gosh, didn't he learn a lesson from that?
Just a bit.
This is my real worry, that immigration is the most divisive issue, that Reform is the only party that's banging on about it in that aggressive and pointless way. We can't use the Navy against the French. We start going to war with the French, they just cut off our electricity. That's easy. So it's what they're coming up with is aggression and hatred and fear, and they're feeding on the fear of people. Meanwhile, actually, you've got to come up with some sensible solutions. The boats, the small boats, is all about organised crime. That's what the small boats are about. And I hope that the government has got its head around this. The real problem is that we're spending a fortune in this country on paying people to stay home. We wouldn't need the migrants of any kind. We wouldn't be needing to issue any kind of even visas if we could stop paying people, 5 million people, to stay at home, and they would actually get the jobs that many people are coming into our country to do. I mean, to me, it's easy. To me, it's obvious. But then I'm not trying to persuade, 40 million people.
Stopping the boats isn't obvious. I mean, if they cut off our electricity, we could cut off their fish. I mean, does an Englishman need a toaster more than a Frenchman needs a fish? There's the question.
Well, you've just answered your own question. I mean, if nothing works here, not even your toilet will work. That's a problem.
Just a brief word. I'm going to ask you again on that point about the brothel thing. Were you just larking around with that comment yesterday, or was there some seriousness? This was an interview you gave with Times Radio where you talked about brothels near migrant camps. What was just put some meat on the bones of this, if you could, Edwina.
Let's just remind ourselves the brothels are actually legal in a country nearby. They're legal in Amsterdam, and the women are given health checks and they are taxed. I've been to see one of them.
So you would facilitate migrants' desires by opening brothels. Some would say that's rather like Vodafone giving away SIM cards.
Well, I agree with you entirely about Vodafone and some of the charities that are operating like that. The point is this: if you're going, the question really was whether we should put, as Andy Burnham has said, whether we should be putting the migrant camps in wealthy areas, particularly, for example, in Oxfordshire, close to a very small village, where we happen to have the land. We have the former army bases. And the point I was making is wherever you put them, if you put 1,200 newly arrived young men, you are going to have a hell of a lot of disruption. To some extent, there may be opportunities for the local cafe or pubs, but in fact, the disruption is immense, and the disruption will be some aspects that people have never begun to think about. So that was the point that I was trying to make.
So
you're quite right.
facilitate the sexual desires of migrants.
Well, no, they're going to bring them with. I mean, if you're, you can't remember, you're too old. But when you were in your 20s, I'm sure you had sort of rampant desire.
Half an hour ago.
And that sort of thing, I mean, that sort of thing actually happens in real life. And it is immensely distressing for the people who live nearby. The charities, I think, are very well-meaning, but they have no idea what they're dealing with.
So we should provide brothels for migrants?
No, the answer is we should process everybody a hell of a lot faster. They should be processed in Dover within a week and sent home. And to do that needs changing the law. We keep hearing how that's going to happen, and we are waiting for the government, who have the power and the votes, to actually do something about it.
Edwina Currie, thank you. Enjoy your weekend. The sun is still shining. Edwina Currie, former Conservative minister. I think there was a bit of a... Was there a rowback, no pun, on the brothel thing there? Was there? I don't... Kind of said, well, you need it, but you don't need it, and I don't really... Yeah. Maybe it was a flippant remark, and we're taking it all out of context. Process them within a week, she said. Just a reminder, who was the party? Just checking the notes here. Who was the political party that was in charge? Just going back, 2004, 2005. I'll get there, don't worry, hang on. 2008. Oh, yeah, it was... I've got it here. That's a genuine sound effect, by the way. Years ago, Equity would have got the hump with that. They'd have said, we need an actor to do that. It was the Conservatives, there you go. Conservatives who didn't process any of those people with any level of speed, if at all. Thank you to Edwina Currie. It's 10 to 9. This is Talk.
Let's get to the calls now. And Kevin is in Basingstoke. Morning, Kevin. Hey. Kevin, what do you think of this cycling conversation?
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to...
disagree with me.
Yeah. I mean, there's far more accidents caused by cars than bikes.
Yeah, we're not talking about cars, Kevin. We're talking about bikes.
I'm never talking about bikes, but if we encourage more bikes, then there'll be less accidents. More people...
more people on bikes who are not being controlled by anything.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. It's coming up on 5 to 9. It is Talk Brexit. We'll get some sports news in just a second. First, let's get a call. This is Gary in Canterbury. Morning, Gary.
Morning, Ian. How you doing this morning?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, fire away. What do you like to say?
Yeah, look, I was actually on the ground in Clacton yesterday. I was doing canvassing, and I spoke to so many people. I think I did about 1,800 steps right the way along. I'll tell you what, there is so much love.
1,800 or 18,000?
18,000, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not a lot. That's just in and out the Weatherspoons, 1,800, isn't it?
Well, when it was like 30-plus degrees, it was very, very warm.
Very true.
I spoke to so many people, and I've got to say, the kind of things that I was getting from people I was talking to is like, not sure who this Bin guy is, and what is he thinking. And the other thing was, I voted for the Bin guy because I thought it'd be funny to see a guy wearing a bin in Parliament. And it was like a joke vote, I suppose you'd call it. But, I came across people who say, look, I don't normally vote, but today I'm going to vote for reform. People are saying I've never voted before until now. And people saying that, look, we've got some serious problems in the UK, and I can't see anyone else who can change the course of it apart from reform. And so I think that, people know that he cares. And I had to disagree with Edwina before. I mean, he's not treating his constituents with disrespect or anything because, they know he's under threat. They know he's got to be in a lot of different places. And quite honestly, I think all the people I spoke to yesterday were very complimentary in so many different ways.
And do you know what, Gary? I think you'd probably agree with this. Even if it wasn't specifically Nigel Farage, it is the thirst for fundamental change, right? And that isn't just about channel migrants. It's about the whole kind of common sense agenda, looking after your country domestically ahead of other considerations. It's that. And we haven't got another... In the absence of anyone else doing that and flying with that narrative, that's the reason why Reform are doing well. Love them or hate them, whatever you think of Nigel Farage, they are offering something completely different. 20 seconds, Gary.
Well, this is all about change. And when you spoke about the establishment earlier, for me, this is a group of people who are really in the old, archaic traditions. They're in the old ways, and they don't like change. Reform is all about change, and this is why we need to move forward. And I'm a candidate. I'm going through the candidate process for Canterbury, and I've got to say, I've never had political aspirations, but until now.
You're taking on Rosie Duffield.
Oh, look, I don't know about the burn and bounce, but as far as I'm concerned, he's going to do a Barnes Wallis, and it's all going to come crashing in when they find out about it.
Barnes Wallis, love it. Listen, Gary, thank you. Good luck. Have a great weekend as well. Gary in Canterbury. Just gone 5 to 9. Let's get some sports news.
90 minutes in 90 seconds. From The Sun.
Lloyd Canfield joins us, Chelsea FC reporter with The Sun. Morning to you, Lloyd. Fernandes not off the news agenda. What is going on? Can we definitively reveal right now, between us two chatting, exactly what is happening?
Yeah, so Chelsea are currently waiting for a bid of £120 million to sell Enzo Fernandes. At the moment, there has been no bid whatsoever. They've set a deadline of 5 p.m. today to receive that bid. And as far as Chelsea are concerned, if they don't get it, they're more than happy to keep him, and there'll be no further discussions until next summer.
I would take a punt. I know Fernandes is the great dividing character at Stamford Bridge, but I would take a punt that City are not going to offer 120 million quid. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I can't really see a world in which someone pays 120 million pounds for him, given that he's run down a few years on his contract at Stamford Bridge.
And also, I don't even think you couldn't say, hey, City, look at last season, and there's the evidence. I mean, he has moments of brilliance. Nobody disputes that, but he has moments where he might as well not turn up, and we know that as well.
Yeah, he's a great player. He's just not necessarily a £120 million player, and he's a bit older than he was when Chelsea paid so much money for him, but Chelsea even overpaid at the time. So I can't see them paying up the money. I'd be shocked if they did, but as a fan, I'd also be quite pleased if they paid that much for him as well.
Yeah. Just a very final word, Lloyd. Not that this was on our agenda to talk about, but Infantino is still the boss of FIFA the last time I looked. Has that story now gone away? Are we just running with the fact that whilst every European club and anyone with a brain thinks this man should walk the plank, there's too many other clubs out there, and countries rather, that actually have the very opposite view?
Yeah, I think he's got a strong backing from a lot of countries and nations that ultimately depend on the finances that he can give or take away from them. So until that fact changes, they're probably still going to back him.
We will see. Listen, Lloyd, great to have you with us as ever. Thank you. Lloyd Canfield, Chelsea FC reporter at The Sun. Cracking next hour on the way. Stand by for that, particularly your calls and comments. Edwina Currie has got a few people fired up this morning as well after that show. I always enjoy talking with Edwina Currie. It's never dull. It's often a little bit all over the place, but she's always up for a chinwag. And she says what she thinks, but she has certainly divided the room this morning. We'll bring you some Currie-based comments in the next section as well. If you want to leave a voice note, 0344 499 1000, and you can message on 87222. You're listening to Collins in for Kyle. It's the final day. Let's get the news on Talk. It's 9 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Yeah, good morning. Welcome back. 3 minutes after 9 o'clock. Man alive, there's so much to get through here. It is a bit of a day. Whereas normally it would be silly season, you know, it's the summer, the stories aren't that generous around about this time of year. It's also a Friday, so you'd ordinarily have a double bubble of vacuous doom on your hands when it comes to what are we going to talk about. However, thank you, Clacton, because you've provided us with more material than we could have ever imagined from a whole variety of angles on this. For those who've only just woken up, firstly, where have you been? But secondly, Nigel Farage won convincingly the Clacton by-election. We're aware of the history behind it and what happened. But he didn't attend the count. He didn't attend the results, which ordinarily a candidate would. Reform cited security considerations behind this, but he did speak overnight about his inevitable victory. Let's have a listen.
I called this by-election because I wanted the people of Clacton, the voters of this constituency, to be my judge, not the mainstream media in Britain and the political establishment who paint us out to be criminals and bad people every day. So I asked the voters of Clacton to be my jury. And the verdict has now come in. You haven't heard it yet. And the verdict is in, and it is a convincing, overwhelming win with more votes.
Well, that's what he said pre the official results coming through. He then said that he will not be attending the count.
I've been advised tonight by Essex Police that there is an organised campaign to disrupt and degrade the result that will take place in a few hours' time. And once again, it shows you the sheer intolerance, the sheer loss of fundamental democratic principles that those that went before us fought in world wars to fight for and preserve. I regret to say, and by the way, I'm not scared of these people, far from it, but I'm damned if I'm going to stand on a stage having won a resounding victory, a ringing endorsement of all that I've tried to fight for and you try to fight for, and be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies, and I will not, sadly, be attending the count.
He will not be attending the count, but let's have a reminder what happened when the count did, or the results did, eventually arrive.
The Count Bin Face, the Count Bin Face Party, 9,455. Farage Nigel, Reform UK, 22,239. And I therefore do hereby declare that Nigel Farage is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Clacton constituency at this election.
With 22,000 votes plus, and a massive majority as well in terms of the percentage share. We'll talk to Baroness Claire Fox in a couple of moments on this very point, maybe a couple of other things as well. First, Samara Gill has been joining us throughout the course of the entire show this morning. Down there in Clacton, I did say to you, Samara, this is such a great shot. If only you could see it yourself. Each time we spoke to you, you've been in a different place. And I said to you last time, as you were standing near the beach, where are you going to be when we speak next? In the sea? And man alive, you don't disappoint. You're in the sea.
I take your orders very seriously, Ian, okay? You are the breakfast host. You are the chairman right now of Talk, and I will, you know, if so be it, I have to get into the sea, I will do it. But it's lovely. It's very refreshing down here in Clacton. Of course, a new dawn. Farage has been re-elected as the MP. It's really interesting in your intro that you touched on kind of, I'm going to try and wade out now, or wade in, back into the shore. But it's interesting you touched on the fact that he didn't show up to the count. I have to say, I've just spoken to a local lady who is absolutely infuriated by the fact that he didn't show up. She said that she lives near that leisure centre, and for 2 days they were basically, the police and all his security were trying to have a look about where he will go. They would, you know, basically making that area completely safe, and it took a lot of resources and a lot of time, and a lot of the local residents were kind of pulled into it. She was infuriated that he then didn't show up. Now, I understand that his security team said that there was a threat. Essex Police have actually come up against that and said there wasn't, but even the Reform voters that I talked to are not happy that he didn't show up to that count. I think a lot of these people are principled people who just want to see their vote being reacted to by the MP that they have put back into power. So I actually think it was a big misstep of Farage not to do that. And we know that he was meant to make a speech at 10:30 today. I now see a lot of confused and bewildered journalists walking around the town because they were waiting for that speech, and they were waiting to try and get a word into him, a bit of interrogation over what some call a sham election, what others call a two-fingered salute to the establishment. So he's not going to do that 10:30 a.m. speech anymore. And a lot of the voters are feeling a little disaffected, but some are feeling very happy. Some are jumping in the water right next to me, going on their walks and enjoying life in Farage land.
The way we've cut the shot at the moment looks as if you're waist deep right now into the sea. You've actually got your feet in there. I should just tell you that, you know, there's always these stories about British beaches being polluted, and apparently one report says that includes Clacton. I mean, don't be surprised if you come out without any toes. Although I do...
Yeah, I think one of my legs has disintegrated, Ian.
That's right.
Never mind.
She went with
Farage
two,
will
came back with one. Yes, Nigel will sort that out for you. I wouldn't read too much into that, because they often say this, and usually beaches are packed and rammed with any, without any misadventure or particular issues around one's health. So I think you're in safe territory. Is there a sense there? I know it's still early morning, 9:10. It's a summer's morning. The sun is shining. It's going to be a stonking day in Clacton. You said there, you know, the various people you've spoken to. Is there, on balance, a sense of relief, jubilation, celebration, disappointment? What is it?
You know, that's a really good question, Ian. I think that there's just a sort of hum of normalcy back into Clacton. I think that they've been barraged by journalists the past couple of weeks. A lot of people have said to me that they've had over 7 Reform UK flyers put through their door, and a load of money was spent on canvassing, in their view. So I think they're kind of happy that normalcy's been reinstated, those who did vote for Reform. I know that I have spoken actually to about 2 people that were not happy about Farage, not happy about the fact that he has used council and taxpayers' money in order to host this by-election, which is pretty much staked on his reputation. And so I think the feeling is mixed, but the people of Clacton, honestly, they're so friendly, down to earth and nice. I think that I think in general people are just happy that Nigel's back in. Obviously he won by an astounding majority. But it's not exactly sort of, you know, the king has arrived levels of jubilation here. And I do think as well that the fact that he's kind of not visible, we'll see if he's around the town today, might just show the people that what they voted for was him coming kind of back in and him restoring his reputation, and less about Clacton itself. And I think that will be the test, Ian.
I think so too. And Samara, on that point, enjoy the rest of your swim. Watch out for some boats that might appear behind you. That's all I can say at this stage. Thank you, Samara Gill, Talk reporter, live from Clacton. She's literally in the sea. Fantastic work from Samara. Let's speak with Baroness Claire Fox, who's not in the sea, as far as I can tell. Claire, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. Look, it was. I think there's a certain element of relief, isn't there, for the people of Clacton that this thing is over. Nigel Farage will be glad it's over. They're back on track. It's whatever way people slice it. I've spoken to the Tories this morning. They've got the hump about it. Edwina Currie thought it was a sham. She would say that, wouldn't she? Etc. The bottom line is, it was a by-election. He won, and he won convincingly.
Indeed. I think that a number of lessons can be learned from this, though. I do think that the fact that none of the mainstream parties stood does show, as I know previous guests have said, a certain degree of contempt for the voters of Clacton. And, you know, imagine a situation where we keep telling people how important democracy is, but when you get the opportunity to test yourself, to hold Nigel Farage and Reform to account, because if you stand against him, then you're involved in a debate with him in front of the electorate, that they kind of decided that the way to deal with Reform was to isolate him. And I think even more despicable was the way that we had actually some of those parties and, in fact, swathes of the media backing Binface. I thought this was such a joke, right? Yeah. Oh, what we can do is we can make a mockery of Reform. We can humiliate Nigel Farage, you know, all of these things by basically saying vote for Binface. Isn't it a hoot? There was a very weird situation yesterday where one of the major newspapers in this country, The Telegraph of all people, invited on William Clouston from the SDP, at least a serious candidate in standing, had him on for 2 minutes, and then had Count Binface on for 15 minutes.
Wow.
Doing an interview. I mean, you just
the world has gone bonkers. I completely agree with you, Clara. Although we obviously had some fun, and it lends itself to a bit of satire, and the fact that it was a bin on his face rather than anything else, again, yielded some humorous comments and commentary. I get that. Ultimately, however, I hated it. I really did. I hated the idea that this is what we'd reduced a serious by-election to.
Exactly. I mean, that's the point I'm making, that, you know, I can't blame Reform for this. I think I understood the instinct of Nigel Farage saying he wanted the main people to judge him on his conduct to be the electorate. I think that's a fine democratic spirit.
Yeah.
By the way, that doesn't mean that he won't have to be answerable to a standards committee, but I think the fact that he made clear this notion that actually ultimately who runs Britain are the voters, you know, who's in charge of MPs, it's the voters rather than committees in Parliament. I think that was a fair point. I do think there was some jeopardy when all of the parties decided not to stand. And the point I'm making, which is a broader one, I suppose, is that the way that the mainstream seem to want to deal with Reform is to delegitimize them, to treat them with total disdain, to try and turn Reform into a joke party. Now, listen, there's all sorts of criticisms that one can have about Reform. There's all sorts of criticisms that one can have of Nigel Farage. That's all legitimate and should be, in a democracy, part of the discussion. But I think you made an interesting point earlier, Ian, when you said what Reform represent is the spirit of people desperately wanting change.
Correct.
Genuine upheaval of the status quo.
Yep.
Feel constantly that they're ignored, that they're sidelined, that the major issues of the day are brushed under the carpet, that even jolly Andy Burnham and his national tour, you know, that there's something about his rather glib attitude to politics that people aren't buying as yet. I mean, we'll see more broadly. But anyway, what Reform represents is that spirit. They might not be the perfect embodiment of a kind of popular desperation for things to change. The social contract in this country has completely collapsed. People do not believe the state have got their back, that they will protect them in terms of crime.
Yep.
They don't believe the prison crisis is being dealt with properly, and of course migration and the endless lack of control of the borders, and so on and so forth. So what Reform represents for voters is a vehicle through which they can express that dissatisfaction. And therefore, when the mainstream parties try and treat Reform as though they're the kind of dirty, kind of beneath contempt, deplorable gammon types, right? And disgusting and not worth engaging with and corrupt and so on and so forth. What they're doing is they're slapping the faces of the voters' aspirations. That's the problem.
I would like to think that even a good Labour politician and a good Tory politician, if you got them quietly over a couple of beers and a crafty smoke, they would say, actually, yeah, we do need change, because I think the status quo, the groupthink that snakes its way around our political system and our civil service is, I mean, it's out of control. It's obscene and laughable in equal measure, perhaps, but it's that, isn't it? It's that, oh, this is how we've all done it. Immigration is the greatest example, Claire. I was watching that one of the Brexit documentaries. There's been a few, obviously, because of the 10 years on. When Boris Johnson was asked to engage in the campaign that he fronted, and the issue of immigration came up, he discombobulated. He didn't have an opinion on it. He didn't care about immigration. It was not on his radar. David Cameron didn't care about immigration. Wasn't on his radar. Theresa May didn't care about immigration. We've had this success, and Labour, of course, it speaks for itself. They've never cared about immigration. So you have this group thing, and they've completely lost the plot, and not just misread the room, but I mean completely misread it in a criminal sense of the word. How many examples do they have to see before these two parties, two major parties, one the most successful in Western democracy in history, the Tories? But what does it take for them to see it? I mean, they're playing a bit of catchy up now, but it's curious that they seem to be... Their attack on Nigel Farage, the underpinning attack is that they're not a genuine party and they're a bit of a joke.
Yeah, I think the point is you're right that they're doing a little bit of playing to catch up, and I think we saw that Shabbat Mahmood has made, as the Home Secretary, has made some, the right noises in relation to slightly tightening up the illegal migration and so on, and the number of deportations has gone up, those kind of things. But you don't, and then we know that to be fair, the Conservative Party have said that we're going to have to leave the European Court of Human Rights and so on and so forth. So I appreciate that the noises are being made, but let me just point out to you that catching up has happened because the public, the voters, the electorate have made their position so clear via reform. I mean, that's why they've had to catch up. So in some ways, what they did was they ignored this situation, and you don't really feel that they've got under the skin of what people's concerns are. And the concerns are security. The concerns are just the sheer frustration of having voted endlessly, that control of our borders. I mean, you can't be a nation state if you don't control your own borders, if you don't know who's in your country, if you can't remove people from the country. That is not a nation state. So when we talk about national sovereignty, voting for more control, that's what people anticipated would happen. And everyone said, went along with it, but they were very snippy. And they thought that this actually belied a racist, xenophobic attitude. And
absolutely.
As a consequence, they've basically done a little bit of superficial, shallow tinkering to keep the voters shut up.
Yeah.
But they're not serious, and that's why people are acting the way they are. And that's all I'm saying is it's not about reform the party, it's about the voters and what they want.
Absolutely right. Everything from, 80,000 people appearing on your shores in 2 years to police knocking on your door for something you wrote on Facebook. It's all it's all of that shift in kind of insanity that people want to move. Bit of breaking news, Claire, since we've been speaking. The investigation into Nigel Farage's donations has now been reopened, because when he stood down, of course, the investigation was paused as per the allegations currently under investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner. This pause has now been undone, according to the Commons website. So that will go ahead for reasons I can't fathom. It's going to probably take months. I reckon it could be done in half an hour. But don't let expediency be part of a conversation when it comes to parliamentary procedure.
No, I mean, I'm in Parliament too, and of course there are rules, but one can't but feel that a huge amount of political energy is going into this. And in terms of priorities, I wish that the energy would go elsewhere.
Yeah.
I thought it was, just following on from our previous conversation, I thought it was amusing that Andy Burnham thought the way that we should deal with the situation of asylum seekers being dumped in in, you know, the northwest and northern towns and places that have not got much money to trump them in places that are wealthier, as though that, talk about missing the point. Yes. Now imagine if the same energy that's being put into kind of getting Farage was put into, for example, resolving the prison crisis, or for example, working out exactly what you're going to do in terms of getting out of the refugee convention that means that we have to treat everybody who steps foot on the soil of the UK as though they've got a legitimate asylum claim. All of these things are somehow, we haven't got time for that, but we've got a huge amount of energy for investigating Farage's financial situation.
It is again, which does feed back to exactly where we began this conversation about the sort of upside down, insane world we found ourselves living in. Common sense has gone out of the window, but it's plentiful in your neck of the woods, Claire, and thank goodness for that. Great to have you on with us, Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer and director at the Academy of Ideas. Thank you to Claire. More comment from you. Let's get a voice note on Nigel Farage. This comes from Sarah. Morning, Sarah.
Morning, Ian. I felt compelled to leave you another voice note after listening to that Kevin Hollandrake. For goodness sake, does he honestly think that speaking like that, speaking like a little child, that he's going to win back some votes for the Conservative Party? I don't think so. He needs to grow up and he needs to come, you know, out with some actual points that the Conservative Party are going to be looking at, not spend his whole interview with you slagging off Nigel Farage. What an idiot.
Is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in Crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:25. Yeah, good morning. Welcome back. Home of Common Sense. Lots to get through. The final half an hour of me sitting in for Jeremy Carr. It's been a cracking couple of weeks, I have to say. Thank you to amazing engagement from our audience. There's a good reason why listeners to Jeremy's show has gone up 25% from this time last year. And that is, well, I say this all the time. There's very few radio stations because that is literally thanks to you. That's thanks to everybody who engages on voice notes, on text, who phones in and treats the Common Sense platform in the correct manner by articulating basic common sense, the way people are thinking, the way you're thinking. So on behalf of Jezza and his team, who've been fantastic, even Christian managed to pull in a shift this week, which was fantastic. And Sam and Mark and all the others. It's been, Neha even did her bit, Shalapay, well, she legged it off ill one day, but we'll let that slide. Everybody's been brilliant. It's been fantastic, and what a great privilege it always is when I fit in on breakfast. I love it. Lots to get through. More comment coming from you. Of course, the big story is the result in Clacton last night. Lord Robert Hayward is with us, Tory peer, pollster and political analyst. You're wearing a number of hats there, Robert, and good morning to you, by the way.
Good morning.
I wonder whether you're able to park the first bit, Tory peer and concentrate on the analyst bit? Or are they inseparable when it comes to a reform by-election result?
Well, I hope they're not integrated completely, and I hope that's the reason you have me on.
Absolutely right.
Is because I can separate the two.
In terms of last night, I mean, it was curious. We all agree it was curious the way this came around, and people have their own views of what Mr Farage did to facilitate this or make this by-election happen. But happen it did. It was a bit weird. There was a bloke with a bin on his head who managed to garner 10,000 votes. He was a bit of a protest, sort of totemic figure for a collection, I would imagine, of different voters. But nonetheless, smaller turnout than 2024. Nigel Farage won it. He won it convincingly with more votes than he got the last time around. I mean, that's congratulations all round, isn't it?
It's congratulations to him. As far as I was concerned, I expressed the view to a number of journalists that Nigel Farage's vote had to start with a 2, and it clearly does. It starts well above 20,000, and therefore there is no question that he's achieved what he perceives to be his end. What was interesting, and I went down to Clacton, I've got here a whole series of leaflets from different candidates, not a full set, unfortunately.
That would have been worth something, Robert, apparently.
Absolutely, and that's my disappointment, is that I met a number of the candidates, I talked to different people. But one of the groups that was quite interesting, which hasn't been touched on much, is that there were a number of people, and I can't guesstimate how many, but as well as the Faragist supporters, there were people who said they didn't want a joke MP for the next 2-3 years in the run-up to a general election. So people who actually are not Farage supporters, but were going to vote for him because they wanted a credible MP from Clacton in the Houses of Parliament. So, but overall, no question, he's achieved his end. But the point you made in terms of breaking news, that the inquiry starts again immediately, although I have to assume it will start at the point he takes the oath again, rather than as of this very moment.
Yes, I would imagine so.
But nothing has changed. He is returned as an MP and the inquiry continues.
Can you shine any light on why these inquiries take so blinking long? I mean, you'd think something like this, it's a matter of, you know, I received this at this date, I should have said that at that date, or I shouldn't have said that. You might think, and a reasonably intelligent, objective onlooker might say, Robert, that would take you about half an hour to work out.
No, there are two issues here. One is you have to listen to all sides and look at the rules. So it is going to take you a while. No question about that. It is not just half an hour. It takes a period. But having said that, I was laughing because the number of times in the periods that I've been both an MP and now as a member of the House of Lords, I've found myself thinking, why on earth is this dragging on and on and on? And I can't answer that question. I am surrounded at my dining table at the moment, other than the laptop screen on which I'm talking to you, with papers that I'm working on through the summer recess. And many of them are things that have taken months, if not years, to try and tackle.
It's a curious system, the parliamentary system. It is like turning an oil tanker around, even for some of what you might think are the simplest of decisions. But this is where we're at. If it turns out that the committee deem Mr Farage did break the rules and therefore should be kicked out of Parliament, I have a funny instinctive feeling they're not going to conclude in that way, certainly not the last bit. But if they did, that would mean another by-election, of course. I mean, that sounds to most people like a spectacular waste of money.
Yes, potentially it would. There are many people who take the view that this has been a waste of taxpayers' money, that it would have been better to spend 250,000, 300,000, giving it to people who are destitute or whatever it may happen to be. And there's no question that that's on Nigel Farage's head, not anybody else's. But yes, you're right, that the process would be that the Commissioner makes a report, then there is a judgment, a recommendation, and then there is what happens if an MP is banned for certain circumstances, then you can have a petition. And we've had petitions in a number of different constituencies at different times. And if it crosses the threshold of 10% of the voters in that constituency saying they want a recall by-election, that is what happened, and it's somewhere relatively near to Clacton. It happened in Peterborough a few years ago.
Just a final point, and this I'm asking you with your Conservative hat on this time, Robert. Nigel Farage and that kind of, you know, it's me versus the establishment. I mean, people will have their own views on that. I kind of know what he means. Whether you give it any credit is another matter. But the one thing he has done is stuck a scare up the trouser leg of the Tory party and the Labour Party, for that matter. Would you acknowledge that? And can the Conservatives do anything to usurp it?
I think I disagree with you on that, and that is that if one looks at the opinion polls at the moment, over the last 6-8 months, Reform have actually dropped roughly 6 to 7% in the opinion polls. At the same time, the Tories have risen 2 to 3%. Reform is still ahead of the Conservatives, but whereas if you go back to last September, they were ahead by roughly 14%, the margin now is somewhere around 4%. So no, this by-election has not stopped the fall in support for both Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. We will judge whether it has had that effect in 2, 3, 4 weeks' time when this filters into the public mind.
We will see. Meantime, great to have you on with us, Robert. Have a lovely weekend. The sun is shining. Thank you to you, Lord Robert Hayward, Tory peer pollster and political analyst. Let's get some calls and comments from you. Steve's in Leeds. What have you got for us, Steve? Morning.
Good morning, Ian. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Fire away.
Right, just a quick one on this Nigel Farage thing.
Yeah.
The Parliamentary Standards Committee are investigating not Nigel Farage, but the MP for Clacton, right? Because it's not the person, it's the position. When the MP for Clacton resigned, that parliamentary inquiry no longer applies to the current MP, because if Lord Binface had been voted in, they couldn't say, well, it's the old, it still applies. So the fact that Nigel Farage has resigned should have killed that inquiry, because he's now a newly elected MP, albeit for the same constituency, but he can't be held accountable for the actions of the previous MP, whoever that was. So I don't understand why they say, well, this inquiry is still ongoing. Well, no, because Nigel Farage is now a new MP. He will have had to declare as a new MP his interest prior to being an MP, And if
some would say it's clutching at straws, Steve.
Well, it's not, is it?
If that is the law, then there won't be an inquiry.
Well, it's not the law. It's workers' rights, isn't it? If I lose my job, if my company investigates me and I resign, and then 3 months later the company take me back on, I can't legally say, oh, but by the way, there's this old case from when you resigned. It doesn't work, does it? Once he's resigned, he's resigned. He basically said, fine, there's an inquiry about me. It may find me guilty, it may not. I'm walking away. If he did never come back to Parliament...
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It kind of, on one level, it does sort of make sense that he's gone back, the people have voted him in. That was a previous... They were arguing that previously he should have declared something for a previous time in Parliament. I mean, if he'd come back 20 years later, you'd think, well, they probably wouldn't be investigating something that happened 20 years ago. The fact that it was 20 weeks, or even less than that, should make no difference. I can only imagine, and I don't think this is like the establishment stitching him up, but I can't imagine that even by the, quote, establishment standards, they would get away with a fake committee investigation if they weren't entitled to do it.
Well, I mean, all I'm saying is Nigel Farage may end up taking it to court and going, well, you can't investigate me. I'm a new MP. I've done nothing wrong. And in a legal sense,
we did hear sort of off the record that Reform perhaps were hoping something like that, but they never fully investigated whether that would be the case. And perhaps they were rather hoping that what you've just said would have been the case. But turns out, because the Commons website now says that the pause in this investigation has now been undone, so presumably from the moment he's sworn in, that investigation returns. We will watch. It's an interesting take, Steve. I'm really glad you made it, because I hadn't even considered that angle of it. But I'm sure there'll be those that are agitating for it, and perhaps the lawyers for reform are looking at it as well. Steve, thank you, in Leeds. Let's get a voice note on the Farage investigation. This comes from Shirley. Morning, Shirley.
We all know what the outcome of the investigation into Nigel Farage is going to be. It's going to be a fact guilty because of who's on the panel. They all hate him, they're all terrified of him, and they know that they can't beat him in a general election. There will be huge unrest in this country if they go down that road, because this is not just about getting at Nigel Farage, it's about getting at his millions of voters, and we're all going to take that very personally. So they'd better watch out.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
22:10 on the home of common sense. Lee says, morning in, oh my God, are these people thick? Edwina Curry saying we should set up brothels for illegal migrants. So is the British taxpayer going to start paying for that as well? We're trying to deter these criminals from entering the country illegally, not promote it. The country's gone mad. We've had a lot of comment on the Edwina Curry chat. She did, I noticed, this was an interview she initially gave on Times Radio yesterday, and she was sort of slightly rowing back on it while not completely dismissing it. I suggested that she was really no better than Vodafone, who are giving out SIM cards, but in this case, giving out sex. If that is somebody's grand idea of trying to stop immigration, it's no wonder the Tory party are knackered. Well, let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. Not specifically on brothels, Isabel, but good morning to you.
Bit early for that, isn't it?
Just a little bit, yes.
I mean, a lot to talk about, isn't there?
There is a lot to talk about, of course, and you know, it's interesting speaking to mostly Conservatives this morning. Edwina Curry had a right old pop saying, in South Derbyshire, whatever her constituency was, I got a 32,000 majority. That's a majority. Farage only got a 22,000. Well, 22,000 is way above the average majority, way above. It's also more than he got last time. I think we can convincingly call that an authentic and a way above average win.
It was a stunning result for Nigel and the left, and I'm just going to, for the sake of this morning, include the Tories in that this morning, are just absolutely furious that their predictions that this would be a complete and utter farce didn't come off, that Farage would be in some way completely humiliated by the whole process didn't come off, and that actually he's been returned with more support than he had before. People probably don't perhaps understand how difficult it is to get voters to turn out in by-elections generally, and in particular in a by-election which is not caused by, let's say, well, in fact, it's hard to think of any by-elections where it's easy to get a high turnout. So,
particularly when it's 32 degrees.
Yeah, quite. People do have better things to do, like maybe be on the beach.
Yep.
So the turnout was actually really, really solid under the circumstances. And it is, by measures that Reform privately set itself and didn't want to shout about, a fantastic outcome. And I think there's just a lot of sour faces this morning because it didn't work. As far as the opposition are concerned, the opposition to Reform, I mean, their grand hope that this would be a summer of farcical scenes with Nigel being followed round by a bunch of bins just didn't happen. They keep trying to say that he spent the summer fighting a bin, but he didn't spend the summer fighting a bin at all. I haven't seen a single piece of footage where Nigel Farage is arguing with a bin. I actually privately had some concerns that it might descend into a complete and utter circus, and the entirety of Clacton would be full of people going around dressed as bins. There would be bins everywhere he went. He'd find it impossible to actually campaign. That actually didn't happen.
No, it didn't. It surprised me. I was expecting at least one photo moment of Nigel standing next to Count Binface. And even that never happened. I mean, Count Binface himself, maybe he's a nice man underneath that bin who decided not to play those games. But, I mean, he could have very easily, on a walkabout, sort of approached Nigel and sort of photo-bombed a picture. But that never happened either.
And, in the old days, you'd have had tabloid reporters dressed as bins. What's happened to the Mirror? They used to send a chicken around.
They did, yeah.
What's happened to them? Why didn't they send someone dressed as a bin to follow Nigel, to hound him every which way? I'm very glad, of course, that they didn't. But it's a sign of the diminishing resources and creativity of tabloid newspapers, with the exception of our own finest Sun.
Indeed.
That this didn't happen.
I think because for the Mirror to do that, they'd need a political department, and they don't have one. So,
well, exactly that. So, bottom line is, Nigel has created a reset today. I, like many of our other listeners and viewers, was really rather wound up by Edwina Currie and also by Kevin Hollinrake this morning, saying that this stunt hasn't paid off because Nigel was trying to escape scrutiny of the £5 million. I can tell you, because I'm pretty well connected on these things, there was never a thought when the plan for this by-election was conceived. Nobody thought it meant that it would end the inquiry into the £5 million gift. No one thought that it would somehow then go away forever.
Yeah.
That was never part of the strategy. The strategy was let the voters decide, the people that sent him to Westminster in the first place. Let's see how much they care about the 5 million. And I think now he has his answer. And we all knew that this inquiry would carry on. And, I think it's certainly legitimate to ask for people to want to understand, is that money okay? That's legitimate. I don't think it's legitimate for an inquiry to take months and months and months, or even a year. That's ridiculous. But however long it takes, nobody at the top of Reform thought that this by-election was just going to make that vanish. What they wanted to do was have a reset and remind people, his critics, of his mandate, which is now increased.
It has increased. So they've announced on the Commons website today that this investigation, which was paused, will now be unpaused. One assumes that once Nigel is sworn in, then that will continue. These things take a long... We were talking to Claire Fox about and our previous guest as well, Robert, about the length of time these things seem to take in the parliamentary system, regardless of what it is they're trying to do. I mean, this was absolutely... ridiculous in terms of predictions, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Why or how does it even take that long to establish whether a rule was broken?
I don't know, but there are much worse examples of that. Cases of people, without going into the personal details, being investigated for failing to declare something tiny at the beginning of a marginal debate in Westminster Hall. In which multiple other people that spoke at that debate didn't declare anything either. Either that they should have, in which case that takes about 5 minutes to ascertain, and then the record can be corrected. Or they didn't need to declare it. How could it possibly take more than, I don't know, 5 minutes to come?
I've been, slightly more ambitious with half an hour, but it just seems curious to me that these things can take that long. Is it political? Because, of course, that's sort of part of this as well, isn't it? That many people getting in touch this morning saying there's no way Nigel can get a fair hearing because all of these people are up against him, and they're like a bunch of crooked judges if it was in a courtroom. They are, they're going to surmise and debate and conclude based on politics rather than facts?
I don't know. I mean, I think...
I'd like to think not, by the way.
If I'm trying to be, as dispassionate about this and impartial about it as I can be, a £5 million gift is a jaw-dropper. I mean, it just is, for anyone, whatever the circumstances. So it is totally fair to ask questions about that. Nigel will provide all the information that is asked of him. And then you'd like to hope that the outcome was not a political outcome. I mean, as I understand the process, the Standards Commissioner decides whether rules have been breached or not. And then there is a committee which is politically weighted, which then decides what the sanction is. Now, if that committee puts in place a sanction that leads to another by-election, I don't think it's Nigel Farage that will end up looking ridiculous on that front. And there have been an awful lot of people today coming on shows, not just our own, moaning about the cost of the by-election to the taxpayer. Reform actually offered to pay for the by-election. And the powers that be said, no, you can't do that because that's a conflict of interest. So people can't have it always. Nigel Farage offered to pay for this process. So don't now complain about it. And by the way, was everybody complaining about the Makerfield, the cost of the Makerfield by-election, which was also completely unnecessary?
That is the biggest by-election story of our lifetimes, I believe. I don't think anything will be more significant than that because of why it happened and how it happened. I mean, I think that is, if you were a student of politics and you had to write 500 words on a by-election that is that has a sort of unconventional backdrop to it, it would be Makerfield, not Clacton, I would suggest. In terms of that select committee, the Standards Committee, and their ruling on this, as you rightly say, I mean, in a way, it could well be a win-win, couldn't it, for Nigel? Because it may be that, if they say there's nothing to see here and what he's told them is actually fair, then it's all done and dusted. If they do go the whole hog and the committee decide there's got to be another by-election, all that's going to do is show Nigel Farage winning 3 times in a constituency within less than 3 years. So that would be a terrible look for the so-called establishment. So they've got to be really careful what they do here, because even those that might want to kick him out would have to think twice about that.
Yeah, I mean, a third by-election is not going to come up with any different result. People, I think Reform might struggle to get another really high turnout because people would rightly say this has just got completely ridiculous.
True.
But he'll still win it, even if the entirety of all the other political parties actually put up proper candidates, Nigel Farage would still win that. I think it's obvious. So why go through this circus? What happens is this ultimately ends up playing into the hands of Reform. The fundamental problems, the reasons that people are voting Reform or want to vote Reform are, as you were talking about earlier, with a number of your other guests, it is that people are crying out for something different, for more creative and radical solutions. And I don't think listening to Kevin Hollinrake and Edwina Curry this morning will have made them think, oh, I know what it is we're missing here.
Yeah, that's what I got wrong.
I've been wondering what it is I'm missing. It's got to be the Tories. We had 14 years of that, and gosh, now how do we miss them? No.
How do we miss them, indeed. Isabel, thank you, as ever. Have a lovely weekend, by the way, in the sunshine. Enjoy the rest of your time out. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. Comment from you. Dave in Aberdeen says, morning, Ian. Regarding Edwina Currie criticising Farage, didn't she have an affair she didn't declare, and wasn't she responsible for the decimation of the egg industry? And wasn't it also the Tories who failed massively to end illegal immigration, as well as bringing thousands of legal migrants here as well? Yes, on all of those things, Dave. Although I don't think you have to declare having an affair, do you, to be fair? I mean, you might want to. You could put that on your list if you were brave enough, claiming for a T-shirt, some running shoes, 3 Mars bars and a hotel suite in Southend. I don't know how you'd write that little sound effect in brackets. Maybe you could give it a go. It's going to be interesting, and Isabel was quite right on that very last comment. If you listen to Kevin Hollenrake, remember, it's not specifically about... For some people, it's only about Farage, and people, you know, personality politics does count tremendously. Farage is a one-man walking political campaigning machine. He only has to open his mouth, people listen. He is mesmeric in the way he delivers. Doesn't matter whether you hate the bones of the man. He can do all of that blindfold in his sleep, all right? So that box is ticked. The wider question is this desire we have for a kind of common sense... It's not, I don't want to say back to basics, because that was John Major's thing, wasn't it? But it is just a sense of normality, a big reset, not a little reset, a big reset on the big issues, whether it's about immigration, whether it is about non-crime hate incidents, whether it's about the old Bill knocking on your door because you insulted somebody on your Facebook page. I'm not talking about people who write stuff that literally breaks the law or libel somebody. Different kettle of fish. It's that. Those things crystallise it, for me, at least. And when you look at the Conservatives, do you look at them and go, they're going to completely change the terms of engagement between politicians, Westminster and the electorate? You don't get that sense yet. Maybe they'll cross that line at some point. Labour, certainly not. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to Alex Phillips in a few moments as well, find out what's going on her show right here on Talk.
Sex spaces on biological sex.
Yeah.
And therefore you cannot have people going into a women's space, which is for women only, who is not a biological woman.
I was wondering whether that interview was conducted on April Fool's Day, because I think it was a new low in the sort of...
A new low for low?
A new low for low, because, I mean, just the absurdity of not being able to ask a very basic question about the monarch of our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. It's 5 to 10. Great comments, and it's been... this comes from Ian in Glasgow. It says, great 2 weeks on The Breakfast Show. Have a fantastic, well-earned holiday. Looking forward to seeing you back in the afternoons the following week. Yeah, I've got a week off after this, and me and Alex Phillips are going to Skegness. Love a bit of Butlins, don't we, Alex?
We do. I could really do with a lovely sort of full English holiday, actually.
Yes,
Wouldn't
that's
it be
right.
charming and delightful?
Do they still do all that? Because they used to do... Because I worked on the holiday camps when I left
Did you?
school. Yeah, for a bit. Well, only for a season at Ponty. Pontins like a summer job.
I can see that.
They used to do all that kind of lovely legs competition and Miss Pontins, Miss
Wouldn't have that
Hemsby,
anymore.
as it were.
I'm sure it's all gone woke these days.
You wouldn't be allowed
Although I
to
don't
do
think
that.
Skegness is exactly the headquarters of wokery.
A lot of great legs in Skegness.
Are there?
Yes.
I bet there's some good fish and chip shops. I've never been to Skeggy, I don't think.
Skeggy was great. I remember it as a kid. I burnt my bum on a helter-skelter.
They used to be dangerous, didn't they?
I think they still are.
I think they probably still are.
So they weren't designed back in health and safety times, and some of them still exist. They're big, sort of huge fiberglass.
Did they not give you like a little mat?
Yeah, you mentioned a mat, but if the mat falls off your feet, then you go down on your backside.
It's you versus metal with bolts in it.
Me screaming down. As I got to the other end, crying my eyes out.
Well, I want to know.
I was only 20.
Who's been? Did Samara go on the Farage Ferris wheel? That's what
I think she did. I think she did. She was in the water. She had a paddle in the sea at Clacton. She's been everywhere this morning.
I saw her this morning, which actually is going to be top of my programme, but she looks like she's living her best life by the seaside.
Absolutely, yes.
Isn't she
think
just?
we will find that Samara moves to Clacton after this.
I think so. I think that's it.
It's been interesting seeing people try to dilute a result, isn't it? It's quite funny when you... So first they were diluting the authenticity of the by-election. All right, people can have their own opinions on that, that's fine. But a by-election, it was fair, it was. Anybody could stand. 31 of them stood. 29 lost their deposits, by the way. Binface held on to his just because collectively he was all those other parties put together. But it was a win. All right, Nigel Farage won a by-election. Yeah. That's it.
With actually more votes than previously.
More votes, yeah.
So, I mean, look, whether you liked the by-election or not, and they've, of course, just reopened the investigation, they were always going to. They couldn't wait to trip over themselves to start saying that was taking place. The thing is, if it comes to pass